Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
шануєм і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. І покажем, що ми браття козацького
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 475 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and it has been an amazing 48 hours. While we've been gone, a Russian general has been killed, the Ukrainians have taken some key towns in the south, and are pushing the Russians back around Bakhmut. Just to summarize a couple of the big notes for the night. It is an amazing night in every single aspect of the term, and it is going to be one of those wild nights. But before we get into it, I have to thank everyone so much once again for getting the Sunday fundraiser up to $9.9 thousand. It was just $75 short of $10,000, and that is amazing to know that the Lee Spring Army is once again blowing well over our goal of $5,000 for UNICEF USA, and got it almost all the way up to 10. Of course, incredible, and showing that the Lee Spring Army will never back down and will continue to help out the Ukrainians until the very end of this war. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on into the Novakovka Reservoir, because we're going to be getting over into the southern front really quickly, but there are some summarizations that we need to make about the situation here in the Novakovka Reservoir, or as it's called, I believe it is actually the Novakovka Reservoir, because I was trying to think about it. It's either the Zaporizhian Reservoir or something similar, but I think it is the Novakovka Reservoir. Nonetheless, we have gotten satellite pictures showing the change in the reservoir height from before the dam was blown up to after the dam has been blown up, and most of the water that would have flooded out of the reservoir has flooded out. And we can see here in this first picture, this one was actually taken on the 5th of June, and so we can see what the reservoir looks like here, and of course it is normal as usual, much like you would see it on Google Maps. And then if we flip forward to pretty much today, it was around 8 to 12 hours ago, we can see that the reservoir has greatly emptied. You can actually see a massive shoreline has now been formed around the outsides of the reservoir, and as we know it, this is getting about as low as they think it'll get, but they say that there's still some water to be escaping from the reservoir and further south, and so the water may continue to recede even further. Nonetheless, although this doesn't look like a massive change, the banks of the Novakovka Reservoir are actually pretty steep, and so this is a massive change in the amount of water that is inside the reservoir. And also, while I was unfortunately not able to really get good pictures of this today, we did see that the floodgate into the cooling ponds for the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant appear to be above waterline now. We do not know how low the waterline has gotten, but that could become a serious situation later on if that is the only way that the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is able to get water from the reservoir. Moving on into the area of Pokrovsk, we also got to see the drop in reservoir height from video footage taken by a Ukrainian citizen in the area. And we can see here a pier that, of course, would have allowed you to walk pretty much a good ways into the Novakovka Reservoir, but we can see now it is about as far inland as everything else in the town. And we can now see that the reservoir begins all the way out here, nearly 10 to 20 meters away from the very end of that pier. And we can see them looking out there and panning on down. And we can see that as he gets this wide shot here right at the end, you can see how far the reservoir really has receded, because it was about at this level where the mouse cursor is right here, and now it's all the way down there. I would say that's maybe a 7-meter drop. If I had to take a rough estimate by looking at this and trying to eyeball it, this is maybe around a 7-meter drop in the reservoir. I don't think this is...
That's massive.
It is massive, and when you think about the surface volume of the Novakovka Reservoir, that is a massive amount of water. To put this into perspective, the Novakovka Reservoir, and this really isn't any laughing matter, but it's absolutely insane to think about. At its height, well, at its normal water level, this held as much water as the famous Lake Mead Reservoir did outside of Las Vegas, Nevada at its height, at its tallest, before it started to, of course, lose massive amounts of water here in recent years, which you can actually see the bleaching of, I think, here on the walls. If I look around real quick, I might be able to find it. Here we go. This is the best place you can see it. At the water height in the Lake Mead area, which is right here where the rocks go from brownish to white, that is how much water is in the Novakovka Reservoir, is as much as there was in Lake Mead at its highest point in its history. And that is insane to think, really, when you put that into scale, that the Novakovka Reservoir, with that much water volume inside of it, was blown up by the Russians, and almost half of that at this point is gone. And it will take years for them to rebuild that dam, most likely, considering that it's in the middle of an active war zone, so reconstruction efforts won't begin immediately. It will take them years to rebuild a dam in that area, and then it will take months, if not years again, to build up the reservoir to the water levels it had in 2022 and well before that. It is terrible to think about the atrocity that has been committed, and of course with this lack of proper water, or a lack of a large volume of water in this reservoir, that means that the agriculture in this area is being affected, the drinking water in this area is being affected, amongst many other things that will have far-lasting consequences beyond the flood that occurred down here south of the dam itself. But oddly enough, while this reservoir has emptied, you can actually see something pretty bizarre happen while this reservoir is draining itself on out. And in the town of Nikopol, people are starting to walk the shores, the newly formed shoreline of the reservoir, and they're starting to find some fairly interesting stuff. For example, some pretty old early 20th century shotguns that are so old that they still have the hammers attached that would have originally struck the percussion cap that would have set off the shotgun. We're assuming that this may have been a black powder shotgun, although I'm not specifically sure. It may have been an early 20th century shotgun that didn't have internal hammers. We're not exactly certain.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty neat, and there's some even neater stuff being found. Of course, they actually found 2 of these shotguns. Both of them actually have no stocks to them, really. They only have the pistol grip, which is fairly interesting to see, but probably one of the more interesting things to show how bizarre the dam being blown up at Novakovka is that they're starting to find along the entire length of the reservoir, we've seen multiple instances of this, old German helmets from the Second World War, from German soldiers that died fighting around this reservoir and ended up falling into its waters and never being recovered. They're starting to find their helmets in the reservoir, and that shows you how wild this really is, because of course in the Second World War, the Dnipropetrovsk dam, which is right up here in Zaporizhia, you can see this dam right here, it was blown up and it killed around 30,000 people, I believe was the number, when it was detonated by the Soviet Army back in 1941. And even still, even when the Germans were retreating across these very plains in 1943 and 1944, not even they, as evil and despicable as they were, blew up the Novakovka Dam. The only dam that was blown up in Ukraine was by the Soviets in 1941 inside of the town of Zaporizhia. They didn't even blow up the dam in Novakovka. And so the bodies of Germans who died in the tens of thousands around this reservoir area are now being found, and with their helmets still intact. Largely everything else is decomposed at this point because it was either wool, cotton, or leather, and so of course that stuff easily decomposes underwater. But the helmets and some of their remains are still in that reservoir and being found to this day, along with Soviet soldiers' remains as well, pretty much right beside the Germans. And that shows you how bizarre and how sick of a crime the Germans have even committed now, because a lot of people look back at the Second World War, myself included, and we call that the most despicable and devastating war, especially for the folks who were the bad guys, like the Germans, who ended up killing 11 million people in concentration camps, and ended up killing who knows how many more of them just in the war itself, specifically in the Eastern Front, and not even they went to as despicable points to blow up the dam like the Russians did. That is terrible to think, and I think that that once again shows how sick and evil the Russian government or the Russian Federation really is in the modern day, is the proof of these helmets having sat in that reservoir since those soldiers fell into it nearly 80 years ago. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of info about the Novakovka Dam and what's being found and what's being seen about the conditions at the reservoir, and that will most likely persist well after the war. We're now going to be moving on over into the Southern Front. And I gotta be honest with y'all, today is a day of celebration. Today is a day of excitement. The last time a Russian general was killed in Ukraine was last year around late summer. So nearly a year later, they finally broke the dry spell and another Russian general was killed. This time we assumed that it was around the area of Bilmak, where the Russian headquarters where this general may have been was. And we heard that the major general of the 35th Combined Arms Army was killed just yesterday. Huge news.
Oh.
And also, let me make sure to get his name, and let's get the full screen here. And this is the transcript from a Russian blogger's post. Heavy fighting all yesterday, June 12th, went on almost along the entire line of the military contact of the Vostok grouping, especially on the so-called Vremivsky Ledge. The troops of the 5th Army had to leave Makarivka. The difficult situation was in the defense zone of the 60th and 37th Motorized Rifle Brigades. There is still an acute problem of lack of ammunition. As a result of an enemy missile attack, Major General Sergei Gorovchev, chief of the staff of the 35th Combined Arms Army, was killed. A native of the airborne forces, Gorovchev served as a soldier in the Kirovbad Airborne Division. Sorry, I had to try and phonetically pronounce that one pretty much. After the RVVDKU, he commanded a reconnaissance company and then a parachute battalion in the 76th Division. Was the chief of staff of the 108th Regiment. In the future, he led our contingent in Transnistria, that was back in the 90s, commanded the 27th Motorized Rifle Brigade, 201st Military Base in Tajikistan, and trained a center at Khabarovsk. Having joined the SVO as the commander of the 5th Separate Tank Brigade, he quote-unquote grew up to the deputy commander of the 35th OA with the rank of Major General, was appointed chief of the staff of the Army, and let me go to the other post, which is continued. Let's see here. Let's see, and here we go. According to representatives of the command of the United Forces, oh man, it won't let me go. Wait, it will. According to the representatives of the command of the United Forces, the Army lost one of the brightest and most effective military leaders who combined the highest professionalism with personal courage. Combat friends expressed their condolences to the families and friends of the deceased. P.S. Unfortunately, it was not possible to find a photograph of the hero in a general's uniform. Perhaps one does not exist. There is no time for a photo in the war. And with that, another major general ended up dying today by Ukrainian hands in the area of Bilmak. That is great news because, as many of you all know, generals are pretty hard to find, and the experience that some generals have is irreplaceable, and it appears that according to that Russian propagandist, this little general right here was full of life and full of great knowledge. Maybe that's why he's not up in the very high up ranks of the generals in the Russian army, is because he may be slightly competent. Nonetheless, he'll now be pushing up sunflowers in the fields of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians will hopefully have a little bit easier of a time pushing through the countryside now that one of the major generals involved in the defensive on this front has been killed by Ukrainian action. And a huge credit to the Ukrainian infantry or artillery that may have been able to conduct that attack and take out that general. It most likely was the artillery that was able to conduct the attack. And so a huge credit to the artillerists involved because they pulled a war-changing move today by taking out another high-level general. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the southern area in general, but specifically into an area that Ukraine loves to talk about a lot, which is the area around Velika Novakovka. A lot has been happening around Velika Novakovka, and the Ukrainians have made it clear that their final objective in this part of the front, at least for this phase of the offensive, is the town of Staromanivka down here. From what we understand, Ukrainian forces are less than a mile away from Staromanivka, and so there is ongoing fighting happening right now for this town. In the meantime, they have taken key towns leading up to it, and we can see proof of that as each day passes. Starting off with our first clip today, showing the Ukrainian 35th Marine Brigade liberating the town of Makarivka itself on the road to Staromanivka. We can see the Ukrainian vehicles moving in a convoy as Russian artillery lands around them. And we can see, yeah, it was really close. We can see them continuing to roll forward. We can now see them unloading from what appears to be Wolfhound APCs, or armored cars, and they're now starting to take the village. We can see the convoy continuing to advance through the village, and the infantry making their way into the underbrush around the outskirts of the village to make sure to outmaneuver and push the Russians on out.
Представники 135-го батальйону морської піхоти, 35-ї бригади морської піхоти звільнили село Макарівка Донецької області від російських загарбників. Але вони не полишають бажання забрати це село обратно. Вони працюють, як бачите, артою, мінометами, танками. Але ми будемо стояти, бо ми морська піхота. Вірні завжди. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And was that just the flag of the unit?
That was the flag of the unit. That is the flag of the 35th Marine Brigade.
Aha.
And so with that, we're now going to be moving on back into the combat clips, where we can see the 35th Brigade moving on along.
No,
and it appears that right there, actually, we just saw one of the Ukrainian armored cars get hit by an RPG-7 to the side, right here.
Не очікували від нас такої приті, коли ми на мастіфах, просто на мастіфах, вони відразу почали відступати, відразу. По правому краю села почали просто відступати через поле. Поки ми займалися кожним будинком, тому що це треба зачистити кожний будинок, кожний підвал. Це, із чого в них було кілька, мабуть, десятків хвилин, а вони змогли втекти. Але не всі. Група орків залишилась у нас в тилу. Після чого сьогодні спільно з 2-м батальйоном 35-ї бригади тил був зачищений. Останні орки були вибиті з села. Часть з них є в полоні. Це з їхніх слів, це Шторм З. Після цього вони почали просто руйнувати це село. Авіація, артилерія, також то сонцепьок хотів працювати, але почали поряд з ним приходи, і він розвернувся та знявся з позиції.
And with that, that's the end of the clip from the 35th Brigade. But of course, great to see that the Ukrainian 35th Marine Brigade was able to take the town of Makarivka, and we got to see the video footage showing them take that today. Actually, from what we understand, Makarivka was taken around 36 hours ago, but the video footage came out today and therefore is included in today's news. With that, we're going to be moving on into clips that we saw from yesterday, showing that the Ukrainians were able to take, in the rapid advance in this area, a brand new T-80 BVM from the Russians. The Russians are very hard-pressed to make new main battle tanks inside of the Russian Federation. However, while it is a little bit more of a difficult task, they still are able to produce a very limited number of modernized, older versions of their tanks. For example, upgrading T72Bs to T72B3s, or upgrading T80Us to T80 BVMs. And we saw that the Ukrainians were able to capture a 2022 model T80 BVM, meaning that this T80 BVM was upgraded during last year and then was introduced in the frontline services immediately. We can see him peering his camera inside the turret, and we can see that unlike most Russian tanks, this thing is relatively clean. It doesn't appear to have been abused by conscripts for too long. We now see him squirming his way down into the gunner's hatch here, or sticking the camera through the gunner's hatch. And we can see, once again, everything's relatively clean. Once again, a shocker. And with that, that is the end of the clip right there. But I gotta say, that is crazy to see a Russian tank that actually looked like it had been taken care of. And the only reason it looks like it had been taken care of is because it has only really been in service for probably about 8 months at this point, I would assume. So this thing kind of entered frontline service around the same time the Battle of Bakhmut began. And I gotta be honest with y'all, that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. They pretty much just got a brand new T-80 BVM, hardly any miles on it. Pretty much everything has either been rebuilt inside of it or something similar, with a brand new armor package and everything else in between. Now, it's not as good as a Western tank, I will admit. It's not going to be as good as a Leopard 2A6, but this is certainly better than what the Russians are largely pulling out, which are T-62s and T-55s at this point in the war. And another interesting thing to take from this video is that if it is a 2022 model of the T-80 BVM, that means that the Russians are so hard-pressed to find modern Russian main battle tanks that as soon as they start to upgrade ones in the factory back in Russia, they are immediately pressed in the frontline service, showing that they have a desperate need or a desperate shortcoming of modern main battle tanks. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, moving down the highway to Rozhny, where we saw a Ukrainian column advancing down this road and passing some destroyed Russian vehicles. And it appears that the Russians tried to make, also we have to mute that, but it appears that they tried to make a little bit of a stand here, but the stand was to no avail. It appears that the BMP got his back blown out, whoops, and we can see them now advancing down the road, and we can see them moving past another destroyed BMP. This one appears to be a destroyed BMP-1 that may have been trying to retreat off of the battlefield when it was hit, and we can tell that because the damage, well, where the explosion seems to have occurred the strongest, is right behind the rear doors right here, because we can see the roof of the BMP has kind of arched upwards, where you can clearly see that an explosion happened there. Meaning that an RPG or some kind of a shell may have hit the rear of this BMP and then exploded in the rear infantry compartment, causing the roof to burst up, and then we can see the turret flew forward a little bit forwards, showing us that this was most likely a Russian BMP that was destroyed retreating from the area after the other BMP-2 got destroyed a little further back. We can see them now moving past that BMP, and then looking into the fields here, and here we go, and right there is another destroyed T72B3. This one appears to also have been trying to retreat from the area of the battlefield, but that was to no avail because it appears to have been destroyed while it was in the retreat.
The key word here is trying. That's what the Russians do all the time. They never quite do.
They never really do anything well. They always just try, like Matthew said. And I've never really seen that work out for them. But, you know, try all they want. They'll never win either way. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the area a little bit behind the lines where the Russians are assumed to be right now, to the area of Volodny, where we saw that a Russian T-72 that was moving up to assist in this area appears to have had a little bit of an unfortunate ending. It appears to have gone off the road and then hit an anti-tank mine immediately. Gotta be honest, it's a little unfortunate for this T-72. And we can see it making the smartest move of its life. Hey, Vadim, you know, we have like a perfectly straight road guiding us right to the battlefield, yes? Why don't we just turn off the road? Yeah, that's a great idea. We could just drive at the road, but let's turn right. So they turn right. And we can see where the anti-tank mines are. They're going to roll over it. And poof, poof.
Nice.
I gotta say, they had a 1-for-1 right there. One mine for one side of the tank and one mine for the other side of the tank. One for one set of tracks, one for the other set of tracks. I gotta say, pretty solid.
Not bad, I gotta say.
Not bad, not bad. And the crew will most likely be bailing because there's no way in hell they're going to be recovering that tank. And we can already see them bailing out of the tank right after they hit the mines. And so with that, that's the end of that clip right there. But I gotta be honest with y'all, that is impressive to see that out of everywhere they could have driven on that battlefield, they drove into the only place that had 2 mines lined up for each track. You just don't find that kind of stuff unless if you're a Russian. And then, of course, the Russians are the ones to sit there and run right over them and then just abandon the $3.5 million tank, and then they never get another one again. We're now going to be moving on from that part of the line, specifically around the Velika Novakovka and Staromanyivka front, and the Ukrainians have been very happy with the progress they have made here. I cannot overstate how happy they've been with it. They've been ecstatic, showing us that they weren't assuming to make this kind of quick progress in this direction, and they may continue to make even more progress. From what we've understood, Staromanyivka is actually around the very end of the defensive lines in this area. I believe there's only one more defensive line right behind Staromanyivka, and then it's pretty much smooth sailing from there. And so if the Ukrainians are able to take Staromanyivka, they practically have free reign as far as a breakthrough goes to go anywhere they want and start pulling Russian forces off of their pre-built defensive positions so that way they can try and counter whatever the Ukrainian units in this area are doing. With that, we're now going to be moving a little bit further down the lines and into the area of Vishneve, where we saw that a Ukrainian soldier was filming a captured Russian position in this part of the line. Of course, I have to say this, while our markers here in the area of Velika Novosilka are accurate to their location, considering that Ukrainian forces were more than happy to say that they were specifically in the spot, the rest of the markers down this line are not accurate for operational security reasons. We have moved them away from where they really would be, so that way, just in case if the Ukrainians do not want to reveal their exact locations in these areas, they will not be disclosed. So, just letting y'all know, from here forward in the southern front, all of these markers are not accurate accurate. And if we do have a good idea of where the locations of these markers were, we move them miles away from where they actually would have been. And so moving on into our first clip near the area of Vishneve, we saw the Ukrainians taking a captured position. And oh, look. Oh, man, they got some beats.
Yeah, sick beats.
Dude, we got some beats, man. We got to get jiggy with it. But we can see that they were able to capture a BMP, either 1 or 2. We can't see the turret, but they took it intact with ammunition and equipment still inside of the infantry compartment. We can see them.
Did they try to camouflage this, the Russians?
I think they did. Hey, what the hell was that, though? Did you see that? Something just scurried, right? Was that like a hamster?
Man, that was a rat. That was a Russian.
Yo!
He's trying to get away.
Dude, it's Prigozhin. He's saying that. Shoigu! Это non-припасно. By the way, we're switching sides right now. And then he takes off and runs away. I think the Ukrainian
if your equipment
camera
gets caught, you know your camo was Garbo.
Man, you know if rats are living on your BMP, that thing has not moved in a while. And we can see them looking around the position. Not really a lot to it. It was really just the BMP. Well, actually, we can see a little bit of their camp back there, but still not an incredibly large camp. It appears to maybe be for a platoon-sized unit, but still, they were able to overrun it so quickly, the Russians left behind the APC and practically everything else in the area with it. With that, we're now going to be moving on, and also, Matthew, I saw a lot of people returning to a old, tried-and-true tradition about the rat jokes. Hang on, I gotta get back.
Ratatouille.
Ratatouille, ratatouille. There it goes, ratatouille. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip. Of course, wonderful to see the Ukrainian forces are moving forward so quickly. They're overrunning Russian positions, and they're also catching the rats off guard as well. They're moving that quickly. We're now going to be moving on to our next clip, where we also saw that the Russians once again destroyed another decoy. And this one gave us a little bit of an idea of how these things are being used in the offensive. Here it is. This was actually posted by Severe of the 95th Rifles, which we've actually seen on Twitter before. But you can see what appears to be a facsimile 2S3 SPG right here in this picture to the left. And then over to the right, you can see that the Russians hit it, it exploded, and then we got to see a little bit of the undercarriage. It's a trailer.
It looks like a utility trailer. They put like an inflatable over it.
It's a utility trailer with a thin steel frame, and then they clad it with wood sheets, probably plywood, to make it look like whatever tank they want. And what makes this usable in an offensive is that a Ukrainian pickup truck can just run over, pick this thing up, drive it somewhere, drop it off in a position, and if the Russians see it, they are going to target it. And that means that the Russians are wasting valuable ammunition that they hardly have any of at the moment to destroy non-existent vehicles. And we can see, of course, that this trailer and the mock-up did take up a decent amount of damage. And even if these things are completely destroyed, they're relatively inexpensive. It is nothing more than plywood and some cheap steel beams, along with a somewhat cheap trailer, especially compared to a military vehicle. You can just buy that all over again and then rebuild one. Or you can take the steel frame and trailer, if it's still usable, just clad it with wood again, and then send it right back out to the front to be used again as another decoy to draw more Russian fire. And we can even see a little clip down there of the Lancet drone that hit that decoy, and then we can see the before and after effect after the Lancet hit it. This is important in counteroffensives and in defensives as well, because when Ukrainian forces make decoys like these, like I said earlier, they are wasting valuable ammunition and resources of the Russian army that could actually be used to target real vehicles and real infantry. On top of that, this is also leading the Russians to believe that there are Ukrainian units in areas that they may not even really be in, or may not even be strong in, because there could, in theory, be only 2 Ukrainian companies covering this entire area of the front, but thanks to some decoys, like maybe 2S3 decoys like these right here, they may start to think that it's not just 2 companies, it's an entire battalion that's in this area, and so then they start to become leery of attacking this part of the front, because they may be running into forces that are far greater than their own, although they may be outnumbering the Ukrainians in this front, and the decoys are leading them to think otherwise. It's a genius move by the Ukrainians, and it's relatively inexpensive, and it's using the art of deception to once again get an upper hand on the Russians, which is something that the Ukrainians have done very well at for so long. Paul Guy called it a psyops, and it is certainly a psyops, no doubt about it. Psyops is missed. I wonder where Psyops is. He'll be back soon. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next part of the southern front, kind of near Hylopole, where we saw a Ukrainian group of soldiers riding in an SUV, driving past some Bradleys on their way to the front. When you see a Bradley right back there, when you see him pull the camera in, And they move past another Bradley. Also, I forgot, this doesn't have music, so let me go back to the start again. We see them passing the first one. And we can hear them passing the second one right there. And I gotta say, I love Bradleys. I think Bradleys are a very good infantry fighting vehicle, and it's wonderful to see that the Ukrainians have such a large number of them. Unfortunately, we have never really been able to ascertain on this channel yet the exact number of M3 or M2 Bradleys that have been sent over by the United States to Ukraine before this counteroffensive, but based off of how many videos we're seeing of these things, both in action and moving around behind the lines, there has to be, I would assume, at least 200 of these somewhere active in the southern front lines. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and a little bit behind the lines, where we saw a column of Ivekos, which are once again a foreign-donated vehicle, on the move through the Ukrainian countryside, most likely towards the front lines. Dang, bro, they hit me with a sick beat. Blid.
Man, trapaholics.
We make it look easy.
Roll with your boys.
Walk with your boys. But we can see the Ivekos on the move. If I remember correctly, I believe these are a Spanish-donated armored car. And we can see them moving on down the road. The road's in a pretty nice condition, and it's a beautiful part of the countryside as they make their way on into the battle. Patrick Anzarella said they got 108 Bradleys. I would believe that number. I would say that's probably a pretty accurate number as far as it goes. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on to our next one around the Hylopole area, where we saw some Ukrainian forces moving on up. And we're going to mute that, but we can see the remains of the Russians that were once here, but they're not here anymore, in the form of that destroyed Ural 4320, and we can now see them rounding the curb. And these guys are pretty much just getting the ride experience of the liberation. Just riding through the areas.
Very casual. Just got their boots out and everything.
Yeah, man. Right now, while they're driving through, the song is playing because they dubbed it over on TikTok, thank God, with a less bad song. But right now, while they're driving by this, it's going, it's a small world, it's a small world. You know?
That's a fitting song for this situation.
Man, get me out of this red, please. That's the Russians say there. Man, I only signed a 6-month contract. The song is not stepping after I come home. But with that, that's the end of that clip. And we're now going to be moving on into the next one, near Konstantinivka, where we heard from a Russian soldier that there are barrier guards behind the Russian forces. Now, to explain a little bit, because there's a lot of explaining that has to happen with this, because a lot of people over the past, I would say, 2 decades, ever since the Soviet Union collapsed and the Russian Federation came into being, have constantly been saying that barrier guards were a myth and never existed in the Russian army or the Soviet army, even in the Second World War. Now, to explain what a barrier guard is a group of Russian security forces that are set up behind Russian lines, and they wait for Russian infantry to retreat towards them. In real life, they usually take an attempt to tell those soldiers to turn around. You can't retreat because there's no order to fall back. And if those soldiers then refuse, they can take some of the ringleaders that are responsible and execute them, or in some instances, like it was stated in the Second World War, they could end up just gunning down the unit as soon as they start retreating towards the barrier guard unit. And we're starting to get a lot of confirmations that these barrier guards truly do exist, and they're being used by the Russian army to this day. Russian prisoners are starting to recount stories that there are barrier guards behind them, refusing to let them retreat. And here's one of those instances right here. And so here's the clip, and of course I'll be reading off the translation. Upon the arrival, without any instruction, we were stationed in the woods. We were told only to hide from the birdies, or the quadcopters, that is. We were hiding until the same Z, who doesn't really know or hear anything, came and said, "Start digging, we're going to hold the defense." In case of our fleeing from the position, we were told there are deterrence squads behind us, aka barrier guards. I don't know who's standing there, but they shoot at everyone who tries to flee. In principle, that's how I got captured. I didn't run, so our guys didn't shoot at me. I was born in Volgodonsk, Rostov region. In the Russian army, I was a machine gun operator at the separate company reporting to the commandant's office of the FSB. The FSB is the modern predecessor of the KGB, and in World War II, the KGB was actually called the NKVD. How were you taken captive? During the mortar attack, I was heavily wounded and couldn't retreat on my own. My own soldiers left me behind. After one night, I was found by Ukrainian soldiers. What was your task on the positions? We were standing on the second line and stopped Z from retreating after their assault. We were given a command to shoot to kill anyone who's retreating. And this is a phone call. This is an intercepted phone call by the Ukrainian SBU listening to the Russians on the other side of the lines right here, just giving you all a little bit of a heads up as to change.
Isn't it kind of interesting how instead of the Russians trying to help their main forces be able to succeed on the front lines, they'll put all these resources into trying to shoot people that are trying to leave because they're not well equipped.
It's bizarre. It's one of the most bizarre and careless things to do. It's like you're wasting valuable manpower, both in the barrier guards units that stop them from retreating, and also the guys who are retreating that you're just shooting dead. You're once again wasting valuable manpower. And once again, in the modern world, the Russians aren't in a population boom anymore. They're slowly declining in population, even in peacetime. And so it's stupid to go and kill guys who are perfectly fit and able, because they'll never contribute to the economy again, because they'll be dead. And then on top of that, they'll never contribute to the army again, because they're dead. And so it's like, this is just a complete waste from top to bottom on the Russians' end. But of course, I really, Matthew, I think that you and me don't really find this too shocking, because over 475 days, we've never seen the Russians care for anyone's life at any point.
They don't care.
But anyways, getting back to reading off the intercepted phone call, did the Z Company commander brought you in? He did. Have them stand on the front line before you. Have them on the front line before you, 22 men, together with some of your brave ones from where you retreated a bit. And have them fire at the flanks, so that they didn't walk onto our positions. Okay, holding the defense. All the machine gun and grenade launch operators, mortars must be brought in. Mavics are to be raised. All Mavics must be raised in the air. You are using Z to the fullest. They are in your disposal. They have no right... Dang, this guy's talking fast. Let's see here. Let me skip back. They have no right to take a step back, only forward. In case something happens, I'll allow you to zero them anyway, under my responsibility. In other words, you were a deterrent squad. Yes. What kind of weapons were you armed with? Machine guns and sniper rifles. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but that is pretty much compiled evidence by the Ukrainian SBU showing that the Russians are using barrier guards in the south. And that may be why the Russians kind of are just dissolving down there, because they don't want to retreat because they'll get shot. And if they stay in their positions, they get shot. So either they just start running wildly and end up getting shot by their own guys, or they try and attack the Ukrainians and then they get shot by the Ukrainians. So it was really a catch-22 for a lot of the Russian units down there in the south right now, because either way, they're screwed. And there's really no way for them to stand up to the Ukrainian army either, because they're so poorly equipped, and most of the barrier guards units have their sniper rifles and machine guns that could probably be used to support them actually fighting on the lines. But anyways, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Hylopole and from the the barrier guards news, and on into the area of Novakovka here in the Zaporizhia Oblast, where we got a little bit of a message from the 47th Brigade. Now, the 47th Brigade is addressing something that I've been saying for a pretty good while here on the channel, is that a lot of the pessimism about this counteroffensive has been because the Ukrainians are not releasing a lot of information or footage on their own, and almost all of the news and information that's been coming about from this counteroffensive is from the Russian side, and so obviously it's tainted, and it's leaning into the direction of the Russians are doing great, and the Russians are winning this whole thing. The 47th Brigade actually had a little bit of a response to this, and I'm not sure if this is calling out YouTubers directly or just everyone in general, but it is very interesting here because it's very pointed and directed kind of into this realm of the Ukrainian war world here on YouTube. So with that, here's the clip. Dear statespeople, I wish you good health. So, to clarify some things that are happening in the informational space, thankfully, I haven't watched much and haven't heard much of what people are writing and publishing, but bits and pieces do make it to me. And from what I can understand, most of what is circulating in our infosphere, including Ukrainians that are personally carrying that infosphere, the source of it is Russia. So, a vivid example of their lying. On the first day when they announced that our brigade had been destroyed, that we had 350 KIA and the entire brigade no longer exists, we had only 5 killed in action. This is a perfect example of how much they lie. And how much of what they are announcing has nothing in common with reality. Don't spread this disinformation and don't drag it out into the infosphere. It's not needed. For their losses, only yesterday, to Tokmak, they brought over 100 of their KIA from this location. Over the past few days, we destroyed 15 of their tanks. 2, something, I don't really know how to pronounce that, sadly. And how many of their BMPs, I honestly haven't even counted. BMPs, wheeled vehicles, other armored vehicles. We are on the offensive. They are defending. And they are taking losses several times greater than ours. About our people, nobody is showing weakness. The boys of the 47th Brigade, the fighters of Magura, are fighting like crazy. I have not seen such brave and worthy people in my life, and don't you dare write a single bad word about those people. They are fighting, among other things, for your right to exist. So have respect. If you don't have anything worthy to say, don't say anything at all. Or write words of support. All those people need your support. Don't behave like jackals. Don't write off people. It's very hard for them. It's hard for them, but they continue to fight. They are effing clawing back meter by meter. Help or be quiet. Thank you. Oh, one more thing that I read. That people are sent in like meat. So, nobody is effing sending people in like meat. Never. And I, as a representative of the brigade command, every day attack together with our people. Every freaking day. Not in commander's vehicle, but in the same vehicle as the infantry. And storm the positions together with them. I'm alongside them. The commanders of the 47th, the commanders of the 47th Brigade, is alongside its people. Thank you. And that's the end of the clip here from the command, one of the command, I guess you could say officers of the 47th Brigade. And some of y'all may be wondering, why do we pick out this video? And, because, there was a lot of videos to pick out today, actually. We actually ended up having to cut a lot of them from the news tonight because there were so many of them, so we had to end up getting the best ones that summarize what's going on today. The reason why I show this is that some of y'all may know, Ukrainian soldiers do end up watching the stream quite regularly, actually. That's how we ended up getting the flags from the 231st Battalion. That's how we ended up getting the artillery shell fired for the LSA, because soldiers of the Ukrainian army were watching then. And that's why we don't like to say disparaging or bad remarks about those Ukrainian infantry that are fighting out there in the field, and we never want to sound like it's doom and gloom and pessimism. This guy just said it right here from an actual Ukrainian soldier's mouth, that kind of stuff actually does bring people down on the front lines that are watching this kind of stuff out here in the rest of the world, while we're sitting thousands of miles away here in the United States or in Europe, covering this war. It's very easy to sit there and detach yourself from the lives that these guys are living, like this guy here in the 47th Brigade, and sit there and say, oh, it's going terrible, and oh, these Ukrainian commanders, they're just, they're just running people into a meat grinder. I'm not happy with the offensive results. These guys right here are out there risking their life and limb every single day. And if even 10 of them are watching tonight, I'm never going to sit there and say anything negative or pessimistic about this offensive, because it is these guys at the break of dawn today, right now in Ukraine, that are having to pick up their rifles again and conduct that offensive all over again for the next day, and keep on pushing this ground and keep on taking it from the Russians and possibly get wounded or lose their life for it. And I'm not going to, for 1 minute, sit there and start speaking pessimism and bad news to put these guys in a bad mood. They deserve the support of the entire world, because it is common folks like this man right here that are stepping up and doing uncommon and amazing things in defense of this entire world and in their country as well. And that's why we always keep a positive note. We're always joking about this, because we hope that soldiers like him appreciate this kind of news and love to hear the optimism about what they're doing and the overwhelming support for their actions. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip, but I thought that was an important video to put out there, because he's pretty much speaking to the Ukraine war news world as a whole, which we're a part of, and I certainly agree with this guy's sentiments. Folks out there, regardless, should have a positive outlook on what's going on, and although things are tough, and of course we showed some of the Ukrainian losses, that's not happening across the entirety of the front line, and these guys deserve to know that everyone in the world is not going to abandon them because things look like they may be going south in just one minefield. They need to be backed up 100%. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news from the 47th Brigade commander, and a little bit further on down the lines and into Yakharivka, where we saw that a Ukrainian column was moving on forward. And it was a very nice video. Was nothing but T-64 BVs, and they go on as far as the eye can see. You gotta love it.
Jeez, that's a lot.
And of course we gotta mute the music, sadly, but you can see the commander here filming a video of his tank, and the column keeps going even further back. And we see his gunner seeing that he's taking a video, so he throws up a little peace sign. Love to see it. And we see the rest of the guys up there in the column, and oh my god. This has got to be an entire tank battalion right here, no doubt about it. All in one place. And I got to tell you, things like this are impressive to see. I'm a huge fan of seeing massive tank columns. Of course, you always want to make sure that they're spacing when they get to the front lines, and I'm sure they're going to exercise that knowledge fairly well. But I got to say, wonderful to see. And we see the next tank rolling up. And I believe that's actually the commander of this T-64 BV, and he's decided to ride on the front glacis near the driver. And I gotta say, it's nice. I love to see this. And boy, how do you know they're going to be giving the Russians hell once they hit those lines. With that many tanks, there's no doubt about it. The Russian infantry will be having a pretty hard time dealing with them, considering they really don't have any AT to speak of. But with
There's
that,
so many tanks out here, they have it looking like a Canadian wildfire with all the smoke.
well, it's not yellow. It's not yellow. It's white. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on into our next one, into the direction of Chernovo-Krenitsia, where we saw a captured Russian started to cry. Now, I don't know if these are tears because he couldn't end up killing more Ukrainians before he was captured, or if these are tears because he didn't really want to be there. Who really knows? We'll give him the benefit of the doubt, though, and we'll say that he's crying because he didn't really want to be in this war and he hates being in the army. So, with that, here's the clip. I can't even understand your language. I don't even know the words you're saying to me. I'm honest. I believe you, seriously. Why the F did I put a gun in my hands? Don't cry, calm down. Where are you going, my friend? Are you smoking? We're not assholes, you know. You attacked us. Take a handgun. Smoke. Don't call him names. He's dead. Don't cry. Don't call him names. Hold it. That's it. Silence. Don't cry. I'm sorry. And that's the end of the clip. And when you see that some Ukrainian soldiers took a moment to actually console a broken down Russian prisoner, and you got to give the Ukrainian soldiers a good bit of credit. They're actually treating the guy very civilly, considering that just probably moments before, this guy was firing an AK at them as they were advancing across the field and then threw his hands up. So you got to give it to the Ukrainians. For somehow, throughout this entire war, throughout 475 days, these Ukrainian soldiers have humanity in them like no other. Way more humanity than most Russian soldiers have. And I gotta say, that's amazing to see, and it's a pretty touching thing, really, to think that Ukrainian soldiers can still see the humanity in the whole thing, even after seeing so many crimes committed by the Russian government and soldiers just like this guy here. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from this clip and on into the next one in the Southern Front, where we saw, once again in the area of Irkiv, some Ukrainian Bradleys moving on up. And so, here's the clip. Oh man, they got the music playing, and the Bradleys are drifting. Man, this is a video. This is a video. We see them driving on by. We see another one rolling on by. Oh man. Dude, you know that's got to be fun to drive one of those.
Man, they're drifting those things.
Man.
I would hate if the track popped off though, because it seems like they'd probably do that.
Dude, they drift and you hear, man, dang it. It's like,
Idiot.
everyone get out. Get out. We got to go pull out the freaking tank track pieces and crap. Dang it. You know, they start going off. But anyways, it's nice to see that none of their tracks came off, and it looks like they were handling the corner fairly well. And it's crazy to see a 30-ton. I think these things are around, let me actually pull that up. I want to make sure I'm correct on that. M2 Bradley weight. So it's about 30 tons. It's around 28 tons nearly. A 28-ton beast drifting around a corner. That is pretty wild and puts the fear of God in you, thinking that if that thing just happened to keep on sliding, there's really nothing that's going to be stopping this thing from sliding through a wall or a tree or anything, because it's just so heavy. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into the other clip near Arikov, where we saw a retreating Russian BMP, which is the Russians' comparable adversary to the Bradley. And when I say comparable, it's only comparable in class, being an APC. Though we can see here that it rolled forward and it left a guy behind. The Russians do not have a no child left behind policy. They'll just leave that infantryman behind right there. And we can now see the BMP just torquing its way straight through the underbrush and on the move right into the road. And now it's on its way. It's moving on along, not at that high of a speed. And we can see that the movements are kind of erratic. And it keeps on going down the road. And I bet y'all have an idea that things are about to be going fairly bad fairly quickly, considering that the video is still going. And it will be going pretty badly for these guys. And so the BMP, of course,
left Jaws music.
Yeah.
Burr, burr,
Karma's
burr,
about
burr.
to get him right about now. Yep, there we go.
Oh.
They hit an AT mine, and that BMP is done for. It looks like the AT mine blew up under the engine bay, though, so probably a decent amount of them ended up being injured. Probably none of them ended up being seriously injured, but that BMP is now completely out of action. A little bit of karma
It's like
for them.
karma struck for leaving their comrade behind.
Yeah, karma struck them quick. I mean, like, that was literally just 30 seconds from when they dropped the guy to karma happening. It's almost like karma is immediate. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip. Once again, nice to see that another BMP had been taken out. And moving on to one of our last clips in the Southern Front, we saw a Ukrainian column of M113s on the move. Of course, not as impressive as a Bradley, but still a workhorse of the Ukrainian forces here in the Zaporizhzhia front. And we can see that apparently, much like the M113s, or really any vehicle in the U.S. Army is famous for, one of them broke down, and it's having to be towed off the line by another operational M113. And we can see that right there. Unfortunate to see one break down. I'm sure they'll get it back in action soon because it took no other damage rather than probably something breaking down in the engine. So they'll probably be able to get this thing running fairly soon. And so with that, we are going to be moving on from that little clip in the Southern Front, and to give a summary of what we're seeing, we are seeing that the Ukrainian forces are advancing in multiple parts of the Southern Front as of right now. And these videos stand testament to the abilities, the capabilities, and also the amazing actions and pushes that the Ukrainians have made over these past 48 hours. Right now, we understand that the Ukrainians are advancing down most of the major roadways to major towns and are practically fighting around them at this moment. We would expect that they will begin to punch through these towns here soon, probably within the next day or two, and then they'll begin pushing on through some of the final defensive lines that the Russians have, and then on into the wide open and widely undefended areas behind the lines, racing towards either Mariupol or Melitopol. We're leaving it as an option right now because in some directions it seems that they may be going for both. But with that, it's now time for us to move on from the Southern Front and on up into our location unknowns. And we actually have a pretty decent amount of them tonight, both from yesterday and today. But many of y'all have also been answering a lot of the questions that Matthew's been asking y'all about some of the leading things that has been happening both in Ukraine and around the world again today. And some of y'all may have heard, but things are starting to heat up once again in the Far East around Taiwan and China. But before we get into any of that, I have to hear what y'all have been saying about some of those leading questions that Matthew's been asking y'all today. And what have they been saying, Matthew?
All right, and it's time to jump into those polls. And y'all know how much we love the polls. And our very first one says, Ukrainian advisors say the goal of the counteroffensive is to, quote-unquote, win back all territories. And is that realistic? 73% said yes, it is. 9% said unsure. 7% said yes, but excluding Crimea. And 10% said no, it is not a realistic goal. And on this one, I'm going to be with the 73%. I think it is realistic. It's not going to be an overnight feat. It will be an ongoing process, but I think this counteroffensive over time, over many months, maybe even up to a year, will eventually lead to the recapture of all their territory. I will make a small note about Crimea. I'm not sure if that's going to happen along with it. That might have to be a separate thing, but I'm not going to rule it out completely because I never underestimate Ukraine because they achieve many feats. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, 1 second. Ask Ryan Jackson to clarify what Rojane he's talking about, or which oblast it's in, so that way I can try and make sure to locate it, because this one would be pretty far. I don't know if that one's true or not. Maybe true. We'll be waiting to see. We'll be waiting for confirmation on that, and also ask him if he could send us any video or picture evidence that shows that is the case as well, because I think he may have just given us a little bit of extra news to add, although it may be a little bit of an OPSEC thing. But
and who's that?
And that would be Ryan Jackson.
All right. I'm going to assume he heard that.
Hopefully he did. Hopefully he heard that, because he was telling us in the live chat, he was like, they have reached Erosione in the south. And I was like, which Erosione? Because there's, once again, like 5 of them down there. And I'm like, which one is it? But anyways, can you reread that poll again?
It says, Ukrainian advisors say the goal of the counteroffensive is to win back all territories, and is it realistic?
I would say it is realistic. But I'm thinking they're probably meaning over multiple offensives. I don't think they're talking about this singular offensive, because in reality, an offensive like Bakhmut that lasted 8 months was literally insane, and y'all could see it sometimes. That offensive practically fell apart and wasn't even moving anywhere for the most part. They were just charging right into Ukrainian lines and just dying by the hundreds without making any progress, because there was really no offensive planning at that point, because the offensive had gone on for so long. But I would say it's possible, but I think they'll most likely have to stop and regroup several times for this singular offensive to be possible, and then I think it would kind of be classified as multiple offensives. But I do think it's a realistic goal, because the Ukrainians will eventually have to retake all of their land through counteroffensives, and so I think that is realistic as far as it goes. And so with that, I hope I addressed that one fairly well, at least in my opinion, and it is great to hear that they have their eyes set on the big picture. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one says, the U.S. says it will provide Ukraine with depleted uranium rounds, and Russia calls it a dirty nuke, and what are your thoughts? And it feels like Groundhog Day, because Britain went through this just a short while ago,
they did.
But now it's happening with the U.S. So 85% said good, send them anyway, 6% said unsure, 4% said, let's not escalate needlessly, and 5% said bad, those rounds are dangerous. And when we explored the British issue of sending those to Russia, we found out that they're really not as risky as Russia is trying to point them out to be. Russia is trying to equate them to a nuclear missile, which is crazy to try to compare those two things to it. Depleted uranium is no longer radioactive to the large extent. If the powder is breathed in or ingested, it's very dangerous then, but simply by being around the rounds, they're not dangerous. And if you get hit with any bullet, obviously that's going to probably kill you. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that is really stupid for the Russians to say that depleted uranium is a dirty nuke, because they are the number 2 country in the world in the amount of depleted uranium stocks they have in tonnage. They're only 20,000 tons behind the United States, and that was by 1996 numbers. And so if anyone was to be a war criminal in their opinion off of that statement, it would be them. The only person that beats them is the United States. It's a stupid statement to make, because depleted uranium is not radioactive like normal uranium is. It is depleted, as in the word. And so at that point, it's really just a very dense metal, kind of like tungsten would be. So it's ridiculous to say it's a dirty nuke. And on top of that, we have already gone through this a while ago when the British were sending their depleted uranium rounds. And we found out that the only time it's really radioactive at all, and it's lightly radioactive at that, is once the particles enter the crew compartment of a tank after the round has punctured it. And at that point, we already know if that round has punctured the tank, overpressure has most likely happened, and that crew is long gone before they can even breathe in the stuff. So it doesn't even matter. I mean, really, it's just stupid for the Russians to say something like this, considering that they too use depleted uranium rounds, and I believe they've been using them throughout the war. So it doesn't make any sense to say that. That's like rules for thee, not for me. And of course, in the world of diplomacy, that's always the name of the game, is rules for thee, not for me. Everyone acts off that principle. But in war, everyone largely operates off of a principle of what's acceptable for you is also acceptable for me, and what's unacceptable for me is also unacceptable for you. And the Russians are not operating off of that principle. That would be like saying, oh, the Ukrainians are not following the Geneva Convention. And the Ukrainians go, well, yeah, but you're not even a signer of the Geneva Convention. And then they go, well, yeah, but you still have to follow it. It's like, what type of logic is that? It's like, that doesn't even make any sense. But
And also, last time, Russia said they would respond to it like we were sending nukes. And what did they do? Nothing.
nothing. Yeah, they did nothing. And that's what they always do. They'll do nothing. So they can shut up and like it that we're sending depleted uranium rounds. And nobody tells America what we can and can't do if it doesn't directly affect them, if we're not going to war with them. And we'll send those depleted uranium rounds if we want to. And we'll help all of our allies, like the British, to continue to send their depleted uranium rounds as well if they want to. No one's going to stop the West from doing what we want. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our third poll says, Putin says Russia is considering creating a sanitary zone if attacks inside of Russia continue, and what are your thoughts? 61% said, what the hell is a sanitary zone? 18% said not good, it sounds nefarious. 16% said it's fine and just more talk, and 4% said unsure. And, excuse me, on this one, I am definitely with the majority. What the hell is a sanitary zone? It sounds nefarious. But at the same time, we know Russia exaggerates and makes empty threats, so I'm not really sure exactly what they mean. The only thing I could speculate it might refer to is maybe creating a DMZ of some sort in between the Ukrainian border and the Russian border. But then again, I'm not sure how they would expect to accomplish that unless they were going to do something drastic. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, what the hell is a sanitary zone? I have to agree with everyone on that. That sounds like something that the Germans would have said when constructing a concentration camp. Like, what the hell does that even mean? Does that mean they're going to start exterminating everyone that lives near the border area on both sides? Like, what is that?
Could they have picked a worse name for a Russian idea? Because they're not sanitary whatsoever.
No, they're not. They're like the filthiest people we've ever seen. They just leave trash everywhere. And I don't even know what the hell a sanitary zone would be in all honesty. I'm guessing that means, like, the best guess I could take, trying to apply an actual logical meaning to that, would be that they would start evacuating Russians from the border region and create some kind of an exclusion zone that's maybe 5 or 10 miles deep into Russia. And then the Russian forces would pretty much be back there with small recon units near the border to see if the Ukrainians push in. I'm guessing that's what a sanitary zone would be, but I don't think we've ever heard of a sanitary zone before, so I don't even know what the hell that is, to be honest with everyone. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see what a Russian sanitary zone really is, because it's up in the air at this point as to what it really could be. But with that, I hope that does address it fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are all out of poll questions, but there are many more that are coming soon. But with that being said, we're moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $50 Super Chat from none other than Jesus UCSB. And thank you, Jesus, very much for that very generous support. He says, Hola, I'm still waiting for the Kremlin to match me up. Boxing match for Ukraine. Also, respect to enforcers. You've brought together people from all walks of life, races, ethnicities, and even U.S. political parties united for one cause, Ukraine and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Jesus, and helping this channel to keep on running. And to address that, I'm still waiting for you to go toe-to-toe with the Kremlin as well. They have not responded to your request yet, and I'm sure that they probably won't because they're cowards, and they're pretty scared. And honestly, I think they would be scared of you, Jesus, because I think you'd probably floor Putin, Shoigu, Nutsack, and everyone else pretty easily. I'm not going to lie. You would probably fold every single one of them. On top of that, I would have to thank you so much for the kind words as well, to both Matthew and me, because we are a team and run this thing together, and what we've been able to do on this channel. And it's truly unbelievable. We usually don't harp on this a lot. I think it's really a kind of a fact of life thing about the LSA, but there are people from all over, from all different walks of life and all different kinds of political affiliations, backgrounds, cultures, and beliefs that have all united on this channel in one cause, which is to support Ukraine. There are not that many channels out there like that, usually because they try and make it a echo chamber for themselves or their own beliefs or something like that. There are others, though, I will admit that. There are a few others that I can think of. But this channel truly is special in that regard, and I think it's amazing that so many people can come together in the LSA, regardless of where they are. We even have Russians in here who support Ukraine, and everyone can get along. It's truly amazing, and it's truly great to know that the Lee Spring Army is that special of an organization. And so with that, Slava Ukraine! And long live the LSA, and thank you so much once again for the support, Jesus UCSB, and the extremely kind words as well. That's incredibly kind, and not really a lot of communities out there can say that they have people from pretty much every walk of life, every background, because, you know, right now, in this live chat, there are probably people in here who are Christians, atheists, you know, Buddhists, whatever they may be. There are people in here who are leaning in one direction politically or leaning in the entire other direction politically. And it's amazing to know that all of y'all have been able to get along for 475 days, and we've all been able to help out Ukraine still. And I think that's absolutely amazing. And I think it shows how one very important cause can really unite everyone all together without a question. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Jesus UCSB. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, really quickly, I would like to make a quick note that while I did say that, I know some people are going to take a moment there to start trying to possibly spew political beliefs or religious beliefs, and I would ask for y'all to refrain from that. We don't want our live chat devolving into a political or religious slugfest in between folks who believe one thing and a group of other people who believe another. The way the Lee Spring Army has survived for so long with so many varying kinds of people in it from all walks of life and different stories is that nobody really shares a lot of their stories with other folks or what they believe or who they are. And that's really helped to keep the Lee Spring Army what it is. And so I would ask that y'all, of course, don't get into political slugfest down there, because we also don't do that on stream. We try and remain as unbiased as possible to make sure that we are able to, you know, keep everyone together in supporting Ukraine, because supporting Ukraine is the #1 priority. And then Paul Hill said, unite everyone? Really? Well, yeah, there's going to be a couple of outliers, but I don't really count the outliers as being important. Everyone always wants to focus on that. You know, everyone could be united on one thing. Like, we could all be united on saying something along the lines of, you know, let me think of something. Bananas are good, you know, or bananas taste good. And then there'll be like a million people who agree, yeah, bananas taste good. And then there'll be 3 people who say, I don't really like bananas. And then for some reason, this million people act like the whole world's divided because 3 people disagree that bananas are not the best thing in the world. And that's one thing I never focus on. There's, even in the United States, there's not that big of a group of people who say that they wouldn't want to support Ukraine. And the reason why they seem so big is because everyone just keeps on throwing around what they say, and they're trying to get people outraged. You know, there's like, I would say maybe in the whole United States, maybe 20 million people, maybe like 7% of the population that are actively not wanting to support Ukraine out of everyone else, you know, probably around the 92% that do. And then they sit there and echo what they say and say, look, be outraged. They don't like Ukraine. It's like, yeah, but it's only like 20 million people, you know, out of like 350. Who really cares? You know, it's like, I'm going to keep supporting Ukraine. I don't really care what those people say. You know, regardless, we're still supporting Ukraine. The Ukrainians are winning, and they can cry about it. So that's really honestly my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well on top of that. But thank you so much once again for the support, Jesus UCSB. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for being a longtime member of this Lee Spring Army and helping us to keep this thing moving on forward and supporting us behind the scenes. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Surprise It's Us, who puts in a very generous $50 super chat as well, and sadly, no comment to address. But Surprise It's Us is a long time channel viewer, and we do appreciate that support very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to thank you so much, Surprise It's Us, for the support. And I believe we used to call you Surprise It's Us, because I swear
Yes.
we used to, yeah, we always used to call you that, and I'm so sorry about that. But I got to thank you so much once again for support, Surprise It's Us, for helping us to keep this thing running. Because folks like
Surprise It Us.
Surprise it us. But thank you so much once again, because folks like you who support us through Super Chats help us to keep this thing running. We don't get supported on this channel any other way. And I've got to thank you so much once again for supporting us and helping us to keep this thing rolling, because folks like you have made this possible for so long. We've really not monetize this channel at all. Even today when we uploaded our short war summary, which was unfortunately age restricted, but you know, sometimes that just happens for weird reasons. Folks like you help us to run those things ad free, sponsor free, and every other kind of free. The only way that we're supported on this channel is from amazing folks like you who decide that you would like to support this channel and help us to keep this thing running. I think that's a great way to run it, because y'all are the determining factor whether we're able to support ourselves behind the scenes or not, and if y'all don't like the channel, it eventually fades away. So with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the final one of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of our news.
And also, real quick, I just got to point out what a diverse viewer set we have. I saw someone say, I'm literally a pro-Russian viewer, and I enjoy watching your streams. And I have to say, that's quite the block list. The cogs of my brain quite don't comprehend that, but we do appreciate the support.
Wait a minute. Hang on. Where in the world was that?
I don't know. I lost it in the chat now.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. I found it. That is hilarious. I hope they don't mind me calling them out or anything, because they're watching the channel. That's just so bizarre. But Infinity Ultron said, I'm literally a pro-Russian viewer, and even I enjoy watching your streams. That's weird. I mean,
that's definitely different.
That's definitely different. I've never really heard. That's wild. And that's like sitting there. That's just so weird. That's like the wildest thing I heard. Honestly, I'm flattered by that someone who doesn't even agree with what we support, because we support Ukraine 100%, would find this channel worthwhile watching. So I gotta thank you for the compliment there. We even are able to make pro-Russians watch the show, and it's a pro-Ukrainian show. So that's new. That's new to me. I've never heard that one before. But with that, Angry Penguin said, it's Putin. It's like, I mean, I don't know. And then Thomas LSA said, bot. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the bot likes the channel. That's pretty interesting. Maybe eventually they'll turn to our side. Who knows? But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. That's just bizarre. I'm honestly speechless about that. And with that, we are on to the last one of the segment, and then we'll be moving on into the remainder of our news.
All right, and our last one of the segment goes to Mark, Field Marshal of the LSA. He has renamed himself to Mark, Incompetent Drone Operator. I don't know why, but thank you, Mark. He puts in a very generous $225 donation. Very generous, and we do appreciate the support very much. He says, I have to say, I feel hideously stressed. This is so important. It's democracy versus dictatorships. Still watching from 7 a.m. at 2 times and got to 40 minutes.
And I got to thank you so much for the mass amount of support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I have to say, it is, I always try not to get stressed about it, because one thing I know, and you know, I've got to be honest with y'all, yes, our government, well, really every government around the world has a lot of shortcomings. You know, a lot of people always take for granted our shortcomings, but when you compare the shortcomings in our country or Western countries throughout Europe, America, and East Asia, and you compare them to countries like China or Russia and how competent they are and everything else, it really makes me kind of a little nervous. Like, man, you know, these people are convincing folks over here sometimes in the West that they are the ones who should be in charge of the world. And it's like, this is coming from some of the most incompetent countries, some of the ones where you can't speak your mind. And some people hope for this stuff. You know, some people hope that the Chinese or the Russians are able to somehow end up being the leaders of the world, kind of like the United States is. And what they don't know is that they're exchanging their ability to say that for an ability to not criticize whatever's going to come forward, because they're not going to be happy. You know, people who wish for the Russians or the Chinese to be the leaders of the world for the most part, they're not going to be happy with what happens under them. And they'll try and speak their mind then, and it'll be too late. And that's something I think a lot of those folks who support either the Russians or the Chinese, they just don't get, because they're being told sweet lies by both of them, and they're just eating them up all the way, not even with a question. And it is a little bit stressful in that regard. But I gotta say, as far as democracies and dictatorships go, somehow, throughout most of history, the free will of people has usually ended up winning over dictatorships. It won by collapsing the Soviet Union. It didn't win that long, but it did win by collapsing the Soviet Union. It won in the Second World War when we crushed the Nazis. It won in the First World War when we crushed the military junta that was running the German Empire and the Habsburgs in Austria-Hungary. I mean, you know, it's usually won out, and hopefully in this conflict, it'll win out again. And as far as 475 days has shown us, it is certainly winning out right now, and probably will end up putting a blistering defeat onto at least one dictatorship in the world, and then we'll have to focus on the other one, which we can't say on stream, but I'm looking at it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you make it possible for us to keep the lights on. It helps us to keep on running everything behind the scenes. And if it wasn't for folks like you, this channel wouldn't be possible. And so thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we're going to be moving on out of this question segment and on into the frontline news. Starting off with our first little clip. In the location unknown news of the Ukrainians using an FPV drone to knock out a BMP-3. Here's the clip. We can see the BMP, we can see the techno music playing, and we can see the BMP-3 firing right there, and we can now see the BMP-3 catching on fire. The firing tank becomes the one that's fired. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip, and on into our next one, where we also saw the Ukrainians destroying a Russian tank. And so we can see the tank flying in, we can see the Russian tank right here, and we can already see that it appears to be an abandoned tank. We can see both of the hatches are open, showing that the commander and gunner have bailed out, and the driver is most likely left as well. The drone, nonetheless, is scoping it out to destroy it, because Ukrainian forces most likely will not be able to recover this one from the field. And so it's better to destroy it than possibly letting it fall back into Russian hands. We can now see the drone trying to line itself up for the rear of the turret, the weakest part, and now diving right into the engine bay and setting it on fire. We can now see another drone. This one appears to possibly be a scout drone or a recon drone, observing the damage that the FPV drone was able to cause. And we can see that there's a roaring fire happening in the suspension area of the tank, and it appears that it's starting to lap its way up the turret and possibly inside. With that, that's the end of the clip, but another $3.5 million Russian tank destroyed. Moving into our next clip, we also saw that the Ukrainians have gotten some Super Pumas, and they've gotten a pretty decent amount of them as well. Also, someone just said hashtag free Shy. I think Shy is free, Matthew, if I'm correct.
I have attempted to free Shy, but apparently, like we had the problem last time with, I think it was, who was it last time?
Joseph Sika.
I think it was Joseph Sika. For some reason, YouTube has a very weird glitch going on with that. When I try to list someone as an approved user to get them back in the chat, it doesn't let them back in, and it should. So I have to do some more troubleshooting on that.
And we hopefully will be able to free Shy soon. Shy is technically free now, but for some reason YouTube isn't letting Shy's account back on. So we'll be still working on that in the background and hopefully find a fix for that soon. But here are some Super Pumas. And we can see two of them here. We can see another one coming down and landing. And I'm a little biased against these things. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I love Super Pumas. Super Pumas are one of my favorite helicopters. I just think they look super cool. Let me show y'all a Super Puma. So, here's a Super Puma. Here's a picture of a Super Puma. This one is used by the Swiss Air Force here. I love Super Pumas. I think they look really good.
A very beefy looking helicopter.
Yeah, they are really beefy, and they look just great, in my opinion. I think the aesthetics on them are great, and they're used worldwide, pretty much everywhere. And so, of course, huge shout out to the country that provided these Super Pumas. Unfortunately, we don't know who they are. The Germans and the French use a large amount of Super Pumas, so it may have been the Germans or the French. It may have been someone else, but absolutely love them. And of course, great to see that the Ukrainians have some Super Pumas for themselves. We're now going to be moving on into today's location unknowns, where we saw a Russian T-80 hit by an FPV drone. And we can see the FPV drone coming on in right towards the tank, and we can now see it hitting right at the rear of the turret. We can see that immediately this hit was quite lucky because it detonated the ammo, and we can see the ammo slowly cooking off in the T-80. We can also see smoke coming out of the front of the barrel, showing us that the breech on the gun is open, allowing more airflow, which helps to fuel the fire. We can see fire still coming out of the driver's hatch, and we can see it kind of popping here and there out of the gunner's hatch. We can now see them watching it from a computer screen. I believe we may be watching the FPV drone hit the tank again. I'm not exactly certain. No, we're actually watching the tank now going up in a roaring inferno again as the ammunition is slowly cooking off and now starting to light up a little bit quicker. Now, this is unlike your normal turret toss. This is actually a bit of a slow burn as far as ammunition goes. We don't really know why. But when you see, it's mostly a gentle explosion at this point. May go violent in a second. And let me fast forward and see if it does. It actually appears that this is a slow burner the entire time. You could pull out some hot dogs and start cooking on this thing if you wanted to, but careful about the toxins.
Yeah.
We can see it still burning. Some Russian out there, Matthew's going, "Блядь, I'm hungry. I haven't had the cooked meal in days." He's about to go up there and try and cook bacon, and then he'll be like all faithful and go and just burn the pot, like melted in his hands.
Yes.
The Russians are once again trying to perfect the Rossiyskiy krokbot, блядь. It looks like they're not really doing that well at it, though. And now the fire is starting to pick up. We can even see a little bit of fire coming out of the front of the barrel of the tank. And
I like how the Ukrainians love to watch the fire all the way through.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh my god, they didn't catch it. It had a turret toss. It did blow up. But we didn't get to see it. That's where the tank was, I think. Oh my god. Whatever happened? It literally disintegrated. It's not even there. It's just a crater.
Is it possible for it to disintegrate like that?
Yeah, it is. If it blows up strong enough, it can. But why? We didn't get to see it. We didn't get to see it. We got to see everything except for it blowing up like a nuke. So we missed that part. But oh my god, there's only little fragments of it left. I don't even think there's a turret. Maybe that's the turret down there, but I'm doubting it. I think that may be the turret from this tank that was blown up earlier. Holy moly. I wish we could have seen that, because that would have been wild. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, where we saw the Ukrainians evacuating a Leopard with one of their German-provided Bergpanzer 3s, which is a recovery vehicle based on the Leopard 2 chassis. I can't play the music, but here's the clip. When you see the Bergpanzer pass by right here, and we can see it dragging a Leopard 2 A6 behind it right there. Of course, missing a track. The reason why they're pulling it off the battlefield is because they probably don't want the repair crews to possibly come under fire and get wounded or killed, and so they're just going to take this Leopard 2 A6 all the way behind the lines, reattach a track to it, and then roll that thing right back up to the front lines and back into service. But it is great to see that they're taking extraordinary care of most of their Leopard 2 A6s and trying to keep them in the fight as best as possible. And of course, we have seen one or two Leopard 2 A6s and Leopard 2 A4s abandoned or destroyed on the front lines partially, and of course just left there. But for the most part, compared to the Russians, that once a tank is detract, they just abandon it permanently, the Ukrainians are putting in a fairly high amount of effort to even tow this thing back behind the lines like they are right here. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next clip, where we can see that a Ukrainian FPV drone did not have an explosive attached to it. I guess they were taking this one out for a test flight, and they decided to scare some Russians that they saw on the ground by flying it down at them like they were going to dive onto them. So we can see the FPV drone right here. Of course, no explosives attached. You can't see one at the bottom of the screen. And we can see the little Russian squad moving down that road at the bottom of the screen. So the drone comes angling itself in like it's going on an attack run. And the Russians see it. And most of them don't even have a reaction to it. But these guys up here near the front, they sit there and they go, "Oh, блядь, it's coming for us!" And it just flies right over them. And so now the whole group is starting to disperse across the street. And we can see the Russians looking at it. We can see even some of the guys back here will start to fire at it. Back here in this group where the mouse cursor is. And we see it flying over. We see some puffs of smoke from their AKs as they're firing at it. And none of them were able to shoot it down. Love to see that this guy just sat there and was like, "Hey, watch this, man. I'm going to take the piss out of it." And just scared the literal piss out of these guys just for no reason. Rather than to remind them that an FPV drone could get them at any moment. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from this would-be buzzing the tower, what the hell is it, Top Gun guy. What the hell is that guy's name, Matthew? He's like a big actor.
Tom Cruise?
Yeah, Tom Cruise. I was going to call him Tom Hardy. I was like, that's certainly not the guy. It's Tom Cruise. But with that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip, where you can see a Ukrainian MLRS, it appears to be a Grad, carrying some extra rockets with him. Here's the clip. All right, we're going to be muting that.
What the hell?
We're going to be muting that. But we can see them carrying some rockets on their Grad. And I gotta say, man, the way they're carrying these rockets right here is Aleppo approved, 100%. And so with that, that's the end of the clip right there. But I think we have to go back and listen to that one more time. That is something.
Damn,
That
man,
is
that
something.
is crazy. Is that actually music?
I think it's supposed to be, but it's I'm kind of putting it out of that category a little bit. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip. Interesting way to carry some grads. And we can see the Russian losses over the past 24 hours, which have actually decreased greatly. And I'll explain why here in a minute. Every single number today, except for the counter battery number, has been quite low. 470 Russian troops knocked out, 6 armored personnel carriers destroyed, 2 supply trucks destroyed, 4 main battle tanks wiped out, 20 artillery pieces destroyed again, 2 drones, 1 helicopter, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and only 1 Bobcat skid steer, or a special equipment vehicle. And the reason why these numbers are low is because a thunderstorm rolled over the southern front, and it's quite a heavy one, actually. It's kind of what we would call in the south a severe thunderstorm, and it has largely stopped most offensive actions, at least for the day, maybe the next 2 days.
They got one Bobcat? Just one?
One Bobcat, But yes,
oh no.
only one, very sad. But still, once the thunderstorms lift up and once the ground begins to kind of dry a little bit, we'll probably see the counteroffensive pick up in full strength again, and we'll see these losses go straight through the roof. Of course, these are all below average today for the most part, except for the counter battery numbers. But once again, it's because of the severe thunderstorm, and that's making offensive actions very difficult. Offensive actions or defensive actions are very reliant on weather. Even in the modern day, weather is a massive determinant of how frontline actions will unfold. And we can see even now, it is starting to affect the losses greatly, and it's starting to affect their offensive abilities greatly as well. So hopefully the thunderstorm will end soon. With that, we're now going to be moving on from our location unknowns and on into the front lines themselves, starting in the northeast, where of course no frontline action has really happened, but we saw that the 10th Brigade up here hit the Russians. Hey Ma, I hit a Russian. Good job, son. And so, here's a clip. We can see them lining up the drone bomblet on what appears to be a tower with a hatch at the top of it. We can now see them dropping the bomblet once the lights are turned on. Oh, the lights weren't turned on. The bomblet fell right into the hole and exploded inside the tower, throwing out a little bit of debris and probably throwing out a couple of Russians. Oh my goodness.
It's Walter A. Lakota Jr. He's back.
Walter's returned!
I can't believe my
Walter!
eyes.
I can't believe it. It's been months.
We've been wondering what
insane.
happened to you, Walter, for a long time. Like
We-
we were genuinely curious.
We had been. We were like, is Walter all right? We were like, was Walter like swallowed by the sea? What happened to Walter? He's back. Oh my goodness. That is crazy. That is crazy. Welcome back, Walter. That is wild. I can't believe that. We've been wondering where the hell Walter was. That's like, where's Waldo, but with Walter. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving from the northeast, now on a really high note, because Walter's back. And we're going to be moving on into the area of Bakhmut. And in Bakhmut, of course, the counteroffensive is going on here, mostly in the southern flank, though. We can actually see that here. They've been able to push the Russians back a freaking good deal. The Ukrainians claim that they've taken 16 square kilometers of ground over the past 24 hours, which is far more than the Russians ever took in the Battle of Bakhmut. The British Ministry of Defense actually did some math today, because I'm sure that the British Ministry of Defense is far better at math than me, and I'm not even kidding about that. They said that for every 48 centimeters of ground, which is about every 2 inches of ground, that the Russians took in the Battle of Bakhmut, they lost 1 soldier. Waiting for that to impact Matthew in 3, 2, 1.
What is it?
For every 48 centimeters, which is about 2 inches of ground, that the Russians took in Bakhmut, they lost 1 soldier.
Oh, damn.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yes, it is.
But anyways, moving on into that southern front, we can see the Ukrainians are losing far less guys and taking far more ground than the Russians ever did. Starting off with our first clip, where the world got a thanks from the Chechen Mansur unit, which is a part of the Ukrainian forces, and they thank the world for their support to their unit and helping them to keep the fight going. And so here's the clip. Good day to all. We are fighters of the Sheikh Mansur Battalion, now in the Donetsk Republic, and to be precise, near Bakhmut. We are fighting against a terrorist called Russia. We wanted to thank Chad for helping and supporting our battalion because he's an absolute Chad. We also want to thank all the Americans who help us and are ready to help in the future. You must know that we've been fighting our enemy for a long time and will continue to fight until we achieve freedom, even if we fall along the way. Do not worry, and be sure that together we will defeat this evil called Russia. Hello to everybody, victory is ours. Or victory will be ours. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. And great to see that the Sheikh Mansour Battalion is getting support from the entire world. And they also made a special shout out to the Americans. So if you're an American in the chat, feel happy because they gave you a specific shout out. And if your name's Chad, feel really happy because they gave you a specific shout out. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on down to the southern flank around the area of Klishkivka, where we once again saw the 3rd Brigade taking the spotlight with their assaults. Some people are saying that 25.4 millimeters equals 1 inch. You know, I hate to tell you all this, but the Ministry of Defense was the one that gave out the 48 centimeters number. I was the one to mathematically try and do the translation into the imperial numbers. And as y'all can see right there, the Ministry of Defense is far better at math than me, because I didn't even know what the proper translation from metric to imperial would be for that. So for about every 18 inches, they lost a guy. So that's about, and once again to try and do very shoddy math, about every 1.5 feet, they lost a soldier.
Now, see, that's why I didn't react to it earlier, because I was skeptical already.
And he was right to be skeptical.
I'm lying.
He was right to be skeptical. But with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next clip where we saw the 3rd Brigade being provided some support for their assault from other guys in the 3rd Brigade with drones. Here's the support. Welcome to Windows support. And they got him. And they moved on to another trench and dropped a couple of bomblets, and it appears that those once again were quite effective. Now we can see that the drones are largely softening up or clearing out these positions, so that way the Ukrainian infantry that move up here have a much easier time taking the area. And we can see right here, another Russian outpost being cleared. You can see this one being cleared as well. And we can now see what appears to be Ukrainian forces moving up to possibly take these positions. Actually, those are Russians, because they're not dropping bomblets on their own guys. And we can see that they're being fairly effective with those bomblets as well. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but it is nice to see that they are once again helping to support their guys on the ground. And now it's time to watch those guys on the ground as they now push the Russians back in this clip. When you see the Ukrainian infantry getting up and getting on the move. And we can see them doing a charging advance, firing as they charge this Russian position. And we can see them lighting this thing up like a Christmas tree. Lobbing a grenade in there. A nice lob. See another grenade going in. And we now see them pointing out possibly another Russian outpost a little bit further down. We now see these two infantry running towards it, firing into it, and then running right past. We see them throwing some more nades in as more Ukrainian infantry begin to storm this tire bunker.
Look at this sanitary zone.
Man, that is sanitary, man. This is like Victorian era levels of sanitary, though. This is not modern sanitation. And we can see that the outpost appears to mostly be clear, but they're making sure. Now I hear them yelling that there's a grenade. And seeing it explode once again in the tire bunker. You see them once again firing into the outpost once more. And firing through the tires into the rest of the tire bunker. You hear them lining up Russians even further down in another outpost, and it appears that as this video ends, they may be running towards that one next and then clearing it out as well. These guys are like the fast food workers of the infantry world. They are in and out within minutes. And I gotta say, that is pretty impressive. And pretty wild to see them working with such speed and such precision. Because these guys just went and cleared one outpost on film, and in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, they cleared out 2 of them and began working on the 3rd one. And that is wild to say. Huge appreciation for how well trained and how effective these guys are at clearing out Russian outposts one after the other, and they didn't even take any losses. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on out of the Bakhmut area, because they were able to take 16 square kilometers of ground. We saw that here. And once again, the 72nd Brigade is beginning to collapse at the seams, and it doesn't really appear that they're putting up much resistance. Meanwhile, in the Donetsk region, we saw that a Russian base was hit quite heavily, and it appears that a lot of Russians were there when it was hit. This appeared to be some kind of a Russian training field, because this appears to be some kind of a firing range, along with a tank range beside it, near a major highway. I don't know how they get this stuff, and explain the safety side of things in Russia, because this just seems inherently unsafe to have a firing range literally on the side of the highway. Not because they're going to possibly be shooting onto the highway, but because someone could have a crash and literally just run right into your shooting range. But anyways, we saw the Ukrainians hit it with an artillery shell or something else. And we can see the dozens of Russians out there crawling like ants right out of the shooting range, and really anywhere they can go rather than there. I gotta say, pretty effective hit. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip, not really much more to say about it, and towards the front lines, where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers enjoying the fruits, wink wink nudge nudge, of their labor. They actually started to eat fruits, just wild cherries and stuff in the woods. So here's the clip. And I gotta mute that because that's the TikTok. But you can see some cherries in the trees. You see some strawberries in the fields, like that one right down there. Life is good for these guys. They're just enjoying a nice smorgasbord of fruit. And I gotta say, man, that's probably really nice for them to have, because I remember when we were kids and we weren't in Birmingham, we had like wild blackberries near us and also muscadine grapes, and we would just go and get that stuff, and our mom would make sure to wash them, and then we'd eat them, and they were always pretty good, actually. I mean, there was never like a really bad, well, actually there were some bad blackberries though. I mean, like those sometimes were like rancid, but most of them were really good. And then the muscadines were almost always great, unless if they were like kind of getting a little old, and then of course those weren't good either at that point. But hey, I mean, like, still, it was good stuff, and I bet these guys are getting the same enjoyment out of these little cherries and strawberries that we were getting out of the blackberries and muscadine grapes that we used to have around our house. But with that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Donetsk area and past the southern front, because of course we've already covered that, and we're now going to be moving on down into Kherson, because we saw that a T72B3 became one of the very few unfortunate victims of Ukrainian artillery fire over the past few months, and ended up being destroyed. And here's the clip. Oh, we're going to mute that because that sounds like we're supposed to wake up in the morning. And we can see an Excalibur fly and get the tank. It's gone. Igor! And with that, that's the end of the clip. But great to see that they were able to take out another T72B3. And in Kherson, of all places. And so with that, it's now time for us to move from Kherson and on up into the United States, because I didn't put down this marker today, but we actually provided another $350 million of support to Ukraine. Most of it's in ammunition, but hey, you know, still pretty good. And so we're now going to be moving on from that little tidbit of news, just because I had to throw that in real quick, although I didn't have a marker for it. And we're now going to be moving to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on the 475th day of the war. And without further ado, here is the speech. And it's a little lengthy. Oh, thank God, I can get some water.
Дорогі українці, українки, сьогодні в день завершились рятувальні роботи та розбір завалів в Кривому Розі після ракетної атаки терористів. На жаль, 11 людей загинули, серед них одна дитина. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Всього більше 30 людей травмовані. Усім їм надається необхідна допомога. Я хочу подякувати кожному і кожній, хто брав участь в рятувальній операції. Рятувальники ДСНС, лікарі, поліція, волонтери, місцева влада, звичайні містяни. Дякую за кожне врятоване життя. Дякую за кожну людину, якій сьогодні допомогли. Цей свідомий російський удар по звичайному місту лише вкотре доводить просту істину. Ми маємо разом з партнерами забезпечити фізично такі умови, щоб російський терор став неможливим. Перше – це наш повітряний щит. Достатня кількість систем ППО достатньої потужності. Плюс сучасні винищувачі. Коли буде фізично обмежена нашим повітряним щитом російська здатність бити по наших містах і селах, тільки тоді держава-терорист зрозуміє, що у миру для всіх українців і у програшу для Росії немає альтернатив. Друге – це знищення основи для терору, для виробництва державою-терористом нових ракет. На жаль, Росія досі має можливість отримувати критичні компоненти для виробництва ракет, які створені компаніями з різних країн світу, в тому числі компаніями з деяких країн-партнерів. Різними шляхами ці компоненти потім поставляють в Росію. Якщо взяти, до прикладу, одну із ракет, які вдарили сьогодні по Кривому Рогу, то близько 50 компонентів у ній переважно мікроелектроніка, вироблення в інших країнах. І сьогодні відбулася зустріч представників нашої держави із дипломатами відповідних країн. Список компаній, які постачають Росії компоненти для вбивств. У всіх партнерів є. Є цей список. Розуміння, як російські терористи намагаються обманути світ, теж у всіх в світі є. І ми чекаємо висновків та швидких дій, які зупинять російський ракетний терор. Україна застосувала санкції проти всіх компаній в Росії, які виробляють ракети. Саме такі повні санкційні обмеження мають бути і на глобальному рівні проти всіх них. Кожен шлях обходу санкцій має закономірно каратися також на глобальному рівні. Має бути посилений максимально експортний контроль за критичними компонентами. І якщо хтось виступає посередником або працює разом з Росією, щоб терористи могли і надалі підривати житлові будинки та вбивати людей, то такі суб'єкти, бізнес чи держава заслуговують відповідної реакції світу. Жорсткої реакції. Вся інформація щодо цього є у партнерів. Це однозначно дешевше один раз і назавжди перекрити для терористів шляхи постачання компонентів для терору, ніж постійно витрачати нові протиракетні для ППО. Сьогодні ж відбулася і нарада щодо підготовки неминучої законної і справедливої відповідальності Росії за цю агресію. Ми опрацьовуємо кілька сценаріїв створення спеціального трибуналу щодо злочину агресії. Злочину, за який повинно відповідати вище російське керівництво. Злочину, який породив всі інші злочини цієї війни. І така відповідальність обов'язково буде. Дійсно, це непросте завдання, але українці виконали вже стільки непростих завдань, що це не лише точно виконують, а виконують із задоволенням. Трибунал буде. Зустрівся сьогодні з генеральним директором МАГАТЕ Гросі. Дуже активно працюємо над тим, щоб не допустити будь-яких інцидентів на окупованій росіянами Запорізькій атомної станції. Поки там окупанти, ризик є для усього світу, і це очевидно. Лише повна деокупація станції та її повернення під український контроль здатні гарантувати безпеку. І ми Зробимо все для цього. Добре, що МАГАТЕ пропонує відправити до нас в Україну групу експертів, які оцінять наслідки знищення Росією дамби та інших споруд Каховської ГЕС. Світ повинен знати в усіх деталях, що відбувається та який злочин проти природи та людей скоїла Росія. Я сподіваюся, експерти МАГАТЕ запрацюють вже найближчим часом. І обов'язково наші воїни, наші герої. Я дякую вам усім, хто зараз в бою, хто захищає і просуває вперед наші позиції. Приміром, Бахмутський напрямок, а це, зокрема, воїни 80-ї окремої бригади ДШВ. На різних ділянках є рух вперед. Я дякую вам. Дякую за надзвичайну хоробрість. Підрозділи ОСУ в Таврі в умовах надзвичайно жорстоких боїв, в умовах авіаційної та артилерійської переваги окупанта є рух вперед. Дякую вам, воїни. Дякую за кожен крок і за кожен метр української землі, яка звільняється від російського зла. Морпіхи 35-ї та 36-ї окремих бригад, 110-та окрема механізована бригада, 128-ма окрема гірсько-штурмова бригада, десантники нашої крутої 79-ки, артилеристи 55-ї окремої бригади, Запорізька Січ. Дякую усім вам, дякую за міцність. І дякую усім в нашому суспільстві, хто розуміє, що звільнення нашої землі від таких окупантів потребує важких, героїчних та інтенсивних дій, які день за днем, крок за кроком дають необхідну потужність нашим наступальним діям. Слава українським героям! Слава усім світі, хто допомагає! Дякую сьогодні Сполученим Штатам за черговий і вчасний пакет оборонної підтримки, артилерія, бронетехніка, боєприпаси для наших хаймарсів. Дякую, Америко! Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Slava Ukraini. And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky while my Steam pops up. Great. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into some leading questions of the night because many of y'all have been asked some leading questions. In fact, all of y'all have been asked some of the top questions of the day that have been circling around the internet, and I would like to hear what y'all have been thinking about them. And so then, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and jumping into our final question segment of the night, we start off with our first poll, which says Polish president urges NATO to accept Ukraine into the alliance now, and his reasons are unknown. And what are your thoughts? 49% said he knows something disturbing, 35% said it's just the usual call to action, 11% said unsure, and 5% said he's just yapping. And it seemed he was rather urgent this time with his request. It seemed like he wanted NATO to go ahead and extend that offer at the Vilnius summit in July. I'm not exactly sure what got him so riled up about this all of a sudden. Of course, everyone's been calling for Ukraine to go ahead and enter NATO, or at least some have. But it seems this time there was some more urgency behind it. So I would be with the 49%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, for the most part, what happened? Reread the line.
The question is, Polish president urges NATO to accept Ukraine into the alliance now, reasons unknown. And what are your thoughts?
I would say it probably wouldn't be the best to do it now. I think it should wait until after the war, because although we know that NATO doesn't have to have an armed response if Article 5 is invoked, it does make us look weak if we didn't have an armed response to Article 5. So I would say we really need to wait until the war is over. Everyone's kind of been on the same page about that so far. And while I do understand the Polish president's sentiments, I think that it should still wait nonetheless. And so with that, I hope that
one question I do have is if he's gotten some information behind the scenes that Russia may actually be considering using a nuke. I know they've threatened it a bunch of times, but hypothetically, if they did, would you go ahead and say accelerate Ukraine into NATO?
At that point, I would say yes. But with the knowledge that we have that a nuke is not going to be used in Ukraine at all, at the moment, I would say that we should probably wait until the war is over, until we know that a nuclear weapon being used in Ukraine is imminent. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, or that hypothetical. That was a really good one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, let me tackle bot. Jaga, he gone.
Oh!
Opened a brand new can tonight.
Man, dude,
but anyways.
Dude, did you see that though, man? He killed us. He said, Enforcer is so annoying. It's like, why are you here? It's like, why? It's like, that doesn't
Oh,
even make
bye-bye.
Uh-oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Oh, what the? Dude, that didn't even make any sense. We haven't even done a voice tonight, I don't
Oh, that
think.
guy's been doing some like subtle trolling all night. I've just been waiting to make sure so I don't accidentally ban anyone again, but
Aw.
just making sure this time.
Man, Matthew had to roll back a little bit because he was doing it so quickly. There was some friendly
Yes.
fire. He was like, uh-oh.
We enacted new legislation because of shy, free shy.
Free shy. We're gonna show what the hell should we call this? The shy clause or something like that. You know, like it's like a shy rights or something like that. You got like a couple of chances.
Yes.
Something like that. We're gonna call it the shy rights from here forward.
Could
But
call it 3 strikes.
Nah, man, nah. 3 strikes. That's like the driver's license stuff. It's too similar. We gotta have something special to this channel. Shy rights. Shy rights. That would be pretty.
There you go.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah. But with that, oh, wait a minute, Cole J said, you did that, reread the line. Yeah, that's part of rereading the line. I mean, you know, if he doesn't like that, I mean, like, hell, he's got problems, really. I mean, like, he must be psycho or something. But with that, we are on to the next.
All right, and our next poll says, reports allege the French President Macron has requested an invitation to the BRICS summit, and what are your thoughts? 50% said Macron is untrustworthy, 18% said unsure, 19% said it's his call, and 13% said nothing wrong with that. And this will be the first time, if the reports are accurate, that a G7 country has ever requested to attend a BRICS summit. A very bad thing, in my opinion, not good. It shows that there's a lack of unity among NATO and countries that are in the Western world. BRICS is not something that is pro-democracy. It is something that actively tries to tear it down. To me, Macron is untrustworthy, and I don't think very highly of the fellow, all politics aside. Just as his approach toward democracy, I don't think that's a good thing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta be honest, I don't trust Macron either, and I don't like the idea of him going to BRICS, considering he just started bad-mouthing the United States so badly that even members of the French Assembly had to come out and say that that wasn't right. Pretty much everyone, except for him, came out and said that that was not right. I would honestly have to say, Macron's a little bit of a some people are calling him a sellout. I would say that honestly would be appropriate as far as things are going and as far as the Western world being united. That's one of those things where a brick starts to come out of the foundation and the whole thing starts to become a little unstable. Now, of course, to give you all a little bit of a historical background, the French have always been a little unstable. In fact, it was thought after the First World War, the French may actually have a revolution and become communist. That was actually thought for a while through the 1920s and a little bit of the 1930s that may happen, and then it never did. That's why if you'll ever look into communist history, y'all notice wherever the internationals were held, for most of the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, the internationals were actually held in France, which is where all of the communists of the world would come together for pretty much meetings to talk about communist ideology and stuff like that. They would always end up in France. So it does show that they always have a little bit of an outside leaning for some reason, but I don't like the idea of Macron really pushing it, because when you see really all of the French government's not behind this idea, except for him, and unlike countries where the majority rules, the president in France is really the supreme power. It's kind of like an elected dictatorship, and the General Assembly kind of just serves as an advisory role to the president's decision-making processes. So it's not really like equal footing like in the United States, where there's checks and balances, where the Congress, the presidency, and the Supreme Courts are all on an equal playing field against each other. In France, there is no equal playing field. The president is the word of the nation. So I would say, don't really trust the guy, and I hope that the French public are starting to see that Macron is starting to lead France in a very odd direction, a direction that France certainly isn't wanting to go in if we're basing that off of what the rest of the French government is saying, and perhaps they should consider electing a new president. And so with that, hope that...
The only positive thing I see coming out of France trying to join BRICS, if that's what they're actually trying to do, is the new acronym for BRICS would be F-BRICS.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. Candido Shrinskin said that in the chat. I was like, oh, that's a good one. But with that, I hope that does address that, in my opinion, fairly well. And also, I'd like to say, France, really cool country. Macron, not that much, in my opinion, not going into his politics or anything. I just don't like the guy, and I don't like that he's bashing the Western world as a whole, considering that he came to power in the Western world, and the Western world is the reason why France is so successful. France is an integral part of the Western world. They are literally the only other founding member of the European Union rather than Germany. I think at the beginning of the European Union's history, it was just France and Germany in the 50s, and then it started to grow into, I believe, the European Economic committee or something like that. It was the EEC, which then included the Benelux countries, and I believe a few others. I think it may have been Austria. Well, no, I don't think Austria joined until way later. But it was the Benelux countries, Germany, France, and then it grew from there. So I just don't know what the hell is up with that. That just doesn't make any sense for Macron to do any of that, and especially considering that France is successful because it is a Western country, a part of the Western world. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, in my opinion, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next poll says reports say the U.S. is preparing evacuation plans for American citizens living in Taiwan. And what are your thoughts? 45% said that's bad. The invasion must be near. 36% said it's the typical precautions. 10% said unsure. And 9% said I'm in between on this one. And I must say that I'm sure there's always contingency plans in place for every possible scenario. Hopefully, the government's planning for everything. Sometimes that's not the case, as we've seen before. But I would say in this case, with 3 different sources telling reporters that this is probably happening, it looks a little ominous to me. And also, for them to run to the press with it, it must be a rather urgent planning, suggesting that something is coming very quickly. So I'm with the 45%. But Enforcer, what say you?
You know what's about to happen. Reread the line.
It says reports say the U.S. is preparing evacuation plans for American citizens living in Taiwan. And what are your thoughts?
It may be a serious situation, but at the same time, I think we kind of do that whenever anything looks a little tense anywhere in the world. So it may just be a precaution, but it may also be indicating that something serious is coming down the road. Although we also thought that something serious was coming down the road during the naval exercises that China pulled off earlier this year, and then nothing happened. And the tensions in between Taiwan and China, or as we really should call them by their legitimate names, the People's Republic of China and then the Republic of China, which now is about to cause a firestorm from ignorant folks who don't know the difference and then want to cuss me out for not understanding that. It didn't really cause anything back then, and tensions have always been like this, and things have always been happening kind of in this direction in between the two. And so I would say it probably won't turn into much if historical precedents to go off of, but once again, any moment could be the snapping point in between these two countries. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, real quick, would like to say, didn't mean to be that aggressive because I was thinking about how I said that about calling folks ignorant who don't know the difference, but I have tried multiple, like y'all have to, I hope y'all understand this, I have tried so many times when explaining the legitimate names of the countries about how the Republic of China, otherwise known as Taiwan, got its name and how the People's Republic of China got its name, and then I go into that and then talk about it, and then for some reason, even after explaining all that, there are always people who just get so offended and actually end up cussing us out, and we end up having to ban them in the live chat because for some reason they just don't listen to the explanation. I don't know what's up with that. It's really weird because I'm always into calling countries by their official names. Like, for example, Japan is Japan. Believe it or not, that's actually their official name. It's just Japan. There's no actual other name than that. The official name for China is the People's Republic of China. The official name for Russia is the Russian Federation, and so on. And so whenever we call a country by their name, I always want to call them by the real name. And then for some reason people don't know the real name, and then they want to get angry about that instead of just listening to the explanation of how that is their real name. And it's a holdover from the Chinese Civil War when the Republic of China pretty much controlled all of China. And then after the Civil War, they were their government went in exile to the island of Taiwan, and then the People's Republic of China, which are the communist Chinese on the mainland, never were able to take over Taiwan. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next poll says, yesterday, the PLA cut into a radio call between Taiwan's Air Force and the president of Taiwan. And what does this mean? 44% said bad. It's a message to Taiwan. 16% said unsure. 25% said it seems ominous, but I'm unsure. And 15% said it's fine. They do this stuff often. And in the most literal sense, what this means is China has a way to break into Taiwan's encrypted communications, and they're trying to send a message to them that they can. I'm sure that spooked them a little bit. It's kind of interesting that China chose to break into a call between the president and the Air Force. That seems to be a pretty bold move, even though they're obviously at conflict with each other between Taiwan and China. So I would say it's a bad thing, and I'm with the 44%. So, Enforcer, the question was, the PLA cut into a radio call between Taiwan Air Force and President, and what are your thoughts?
I would have to say, my thoughts are they could have ended that really easily if the president of Taiwan said Tiananmen Square 1989, Tiananmen Square 1989. You just would have heard
boy.
some dragging of chairs on the other side. You heard, no, let me go. That's what you would have heard. I didn't mean that. I didn't say that. And you would have heard that, and it would have been over with, and they would have never intercepted the call again. But moving on from that, that does show that the Chinese are trying to show that they are able to break through their communication lines, but that also tips off the Republic of China that they are able to do that, and that will then spurn the Republic of China to start encrypting their messages in other forms or other ways. So with that, I would say that was a really dumb move. I mean, it showed that the Republic of China's encryption doesn't work, which is not good for them, but at the same time, that means if the Chinese are to go to war in, say, a year's time, the Republic of China's encryptions will probably have changed completely by that point, and then they'll have no way to be able to intercept any of their transmissions. And so, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last poll says Lukashenko threatens that he will use nukes on anyone that aggresses on Belarus. And what are your thoughts? 42% said, I don't think he could launch. 33% said it's fine, they won't launch them. 19% said not good, Belarus controls nukes. And 6% said unsure. And the part here that Lukashenko is leaving out in his little threat is that he's not going to control the nukes. Russia is basically putting them on loan and stationing them inside of Belarus, but he won't actually have his finger on the trigger. So he's trying to take some liberties here, like everyone's idiots, and bluff them into thinking he's going to start launching nukes all over the place. One thing I found interesting is that he didn't mention that Russia wouldn't qualify for that threat as well. So I'm not sure exactly what he's doing here, but it seems stupid. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that is really silly for him to say something like that. It's like, who in the hell's wanting to take Belarus? There's nothing there. You know, it's like there's literally nothing in Belarus worth taking. You know, it's not like NATO invades other countries or anything. We haven't seen that. Well, yeah, we haven't seen that actually ever. So it's like, what the hell would do that? So that just is a dumb statement, you know, to try and posture to sound strong. And I would say it doesn't really have any effect on anyone, rather than him just trying to make himself look a little bit better to his citizenry, like he's a defender of the realm or something. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are all out of poll questions. And thank you all very much for answering those poll questions while I stall here for a second while my spreadsheet catches up. And Enforcer, in the meantime, would you like to plug the merch?
Yes, I would. Many of y'all may know that we passed $1 million raised on this channel last Sunday. This Sunday, we got up to $9.975 thousand raised, which means that we're now around 1 million, well, actually $1,020,000 raised. In celebration of this channel being able to raise $1 million, we have run an exclusive merch run, which you can find on theforcestore.com thanks to popular demand. Many people wanted us to put out a $1 million raised merch run, and we actually were able to. I have to give a huge thanks to Elizabeth from California, who designed the honey badger eating the $1 million sign, because it is incredibly cool. And speaking of which, they've actually received a little bit of that moich. Maybe Elizabeth from California is watching tonight, not entirely sure. We do know that some of her family is watching. And it looks really good. They actually sent us a picture of them wearing it, and it looked amazing. And it honestly looks better in person than it does in these pictures. But still, if you want to get some, you can get this merch right here. It's the $1 million raised merch. It's a limited time only. It began last week on Tuesday, and it will keep running until Saturday of this week. A whole 2 weeks, which is the first time we've ever done that for a limited edition run. It, of course, helps this channel keep on running. And it also gets y'all something to commemorate the $1 million that all of us combined had raised. And it is amazing to know this channel has actually been able to make it to this milestone, because no other YouTube channel out there has. No one has even gotten close to raising $1 million for nonprofits that have been helping out and operating in Ukraine. And it is amazing to think that this channel has. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were able to commemorate this with a limited edition merch run. Of course, helps to support the channel, and it gets y'all something cool to commemorate the moment with. And so with that, hope that does.
And you can find this merch at enforcerstore.com. That's ENFORCER store.com.
Or the link in the description below. You can click on the link in the description below. It's the first link, and that's probably a lot easier. Just click on it, and it'll send you right over there. And so with that, I hope that does.
1-800-CALL-ENFORCER.
1-800-GET-MERCH now. That's 1-800-GET-MERCH now. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, we're moving on to our super chat questions. We have a lot of good questions. And of course, up first, we have a very generous $50 super chat from the return of Walter A. Lakota Jr.
Walter!
And it's good to see you again, Walter. And he says, Aloha, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. Yes.
Yo!
Been busy working right now, and things seem to be heating up onto southern Ukraine. We'll take one from the chat, and OG Ellison Bosun out.
And thank you so much for the support, Walter, and welcome back. I can't believe you're back. We actually thought you just like disappeared off the face of the earth. We were like, where the hell did he go? And now you're finally back. And I gotta thank you so much once again for coming back. Hope you've been having a fun time out there on the seas, on the USNS Loyal. And things have certainly been heating up in the southeast while you've been away. Things have gotten crazy there. And you came back just in time. It's only been going on for about a week at this point. The Ukrainians are making great progress. And I got to thank you so much once again for coming back, Walter, and supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing on running. And it's so cool to know that the OG Ellison Bosun has returned, because that got ingrained in my head and it's never gone away. And so every time I ask, where is Mark? Well, not Mark, sorry, Walter, OG Ellison Bosun. He's right here. He's back. And that is so cool. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And welcome back, Walter. Welcome back. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support. I hope you have a fun time continuing working. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $50 super chat from also a channel legend, BC Skyman, once again. And thank you, BC, for that support.
Yo!
He says, heading to the Hot Rod Power Tour. Enforcers must keep me awake on the road. See everyone when I get back, and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman. We will try and keep you awake, hopefully, while you're on that road. It's a very late time at night to be on that road right now in Georgia. It's like 11 o'clock. But I do thank you so much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope you have fun at the Hot Rod Power Tour, because you have loads of hot rods. We've seen them, Matthew and me have, and he has tons of them, and they're incredibly cool. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel, helping us to keep this thing on running, and hopefully we are keeping you awake while you're on the road. And I hope that that is our return payment to you for supporting this channel, is helping you to stay awake while you're rolling down the road and to the Hot Rod Power Tour. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well, BC Skyman, and I hope you have a fun time there, because I know with the cars you got, you will be a star of the show. And so with that, thank you so much. I hope that does address that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one, but thank you so much once again for being an OG, or as we call him, an old guard of the Lee Spring Army, and being here ever since the dawn of time, pretty much, ever since around day 4, which was 471 days ago. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And also, Christopher Huff. He called us out. Call him out. Call him out. He said, I forgot Walter's chat question, and you're correct, Christopher. I did forget his chat question, so we're going to be returning to that right now. Walter's chat question, sponsored by him, and also helped out very much by Christopher. It goes to Arnie YDT, who says, is it illegal for Ukraine to use incendiary grenades against trench dugouts?
It isn't. It's not actually illegal to use incendiaries like that against soldiers. So they're perfectly fine doing that, actually. It's not against any conventions. I honestly think, though, that incendiaries in war are inhumane. I don't really like seeing them being used, especially on populated areas like the Russians commonly do with their incendiary shells. But still, it isn't really a violation of the war. So while I dislike it, it's perfectly fine within the rules. And so, dude, that sounded like me explaining a play in hockey or something. I was like, it's perfectly fine in the rules. You know, it's just a rule book. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Ani Yont. And thank you so much once again, Walter, for sponsoring that live chat. And we completely forgot about it. I'm so sorry about that. But I'm glad we were able to circle back and get it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one is a $25 donation from Suki, who says, glory to Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Suki, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible. You help us to keep the lights on, to help things keep running behind the scenes. Of course, keeping the lights on is code for paying rent. And you help us to keep everything running behind the scenes. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling, because folks like you make it possible. there are no strings. There is no ads, no sponsors. The only way we run this channel is through y'all support. The only way we can support ourselves to do this as a job is through y'all support. And we are greatly appreciative to each and every one of y'all who decides that this channel is worthwhile enough to support, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, it would have never been possible for us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from none other than Charlie Nickel. And thank you, Charlie, very much for that support. He says, I got an early flight, so going to watch tonight's stream while flying to Montreal tomorrow. Canadian Grand Prix time. Great work, guys, and Slav Ukraine. Kick it.
And thank you so much for the support, Charlie. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running.
Shoddy?
Charlie.
Oh, it sounded like you said shoddy.
No, I
like
said
shoddy.
Charlie got low. anyways,
Oh, no.
Anyways, I thank you so much for the support, Charlie. I said Charlie, not Shorty, Matthew. Good God. But I gotta thank you so much once again for the support. And when you get, you know, Matthew, when he wakes up, like he's gonna fall asleep on the flight, he's gonna wake up and he's gonna hear the pilot go, boom, boom. We are landing at Montreal right now, and then the oxygen masks drop from the ceiling, and the whole freaking cabin is filled with smoke. Where am I? It's like you're in the middle of a giant wildfire right now, man. It's bad up there. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Charlie. And thank you for the kind words as well. I hope you have a fun flight up there, and I hope you've been enjoying watching this on the flight. If you're still on that flight as of right now, I'm not sure where you are in the middle of that flight, but thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And I hope that the smoke up there in Quebec Montreal actually, is not as bad as I'm thinking it is. Because down in New York, they're pretty much getting suffocated, like in the air quality maps. They're practically just breathing in like death. And let me go pull that up. USA, North America. Air
USA.
quality map. USA. But anyways, air pollution in... This is from Beijing Air Quality. I have a feeling they don't really know what the air quality is here in North America. So we'll go to
What's
air
up,
now.
Beijing?
What's
No,
up,
they
Beijing?
do. They have spy balloons flying over every day, so they probably know.
Let's see. Let's go to Beijing Air Quality and let's see what they got. Oh, hello. Wow, look. They actually have air quality in North America. Look, those spy balloons actually mean something after all. Look at that.
Wow. They even have a little smiley face to go along with it.
Yeah,
to
they
make you
even-
happy.
They even put a little smiley face. They said, "Don't be sad, smile." It's like
What now? Let's see if they're honest though. What do they show China's air pollution to be? Did they show that?
I don't know because this map.
Can you drag it over to it?
It's perfectly clean in China.
Oh.
It just doesn't say. Wait a minute, hang on. It did. It
I think it's
loaded.
populated now. Zoom in a little bit.
Hang on. I can't zoom in. Oh, wait, control and zoom. Ah, here we go. So let's see. It appears they don't actually have any information on China. China has perfectly clean air according to the Chinese. We all know that's a lie.
Oh.
So let's
It's all perfect here. What's on Michelin?
What's up, Beijing? But let's go back to the U.S. Oh my God, what is happening in Mexico? Jesus, they're dying down there. They're literally breathing in like sawdust. I don't know what's
Jeez.
up with that. That's bad. And also up there near Coaling Lake, the air quality is poor. So I hope Colleen's doing well because it's showing that it's not doing that great up in that area. But moving on down towards New York, they're actually saying the air quality in New York is not that bad. But based on the pictures I saw, it ought to be doing bad. Everywhere. up there
Damn,
ought to
somebody up there is having a horrible rating. It's 184 or something over there in some state. What?
Dude, that's
What's
like...
going on there?
What the hell? That is not that far from...
Those people are choking to death.
Man, those people are choking to death, man. Like,
What state is this in?
that's Minnesota.
Is that Minnesota?
Yeah. Look at that, man. I mean, damn.
Causes brain fog too, I guess.
I guess so. I mean, like, you know, with that kind of air quality, apparently your judgment is impaired greatly, I would assume.
Imagine so.
I'd imagine so. Quite unfortunate. But hopefully there's some kind of a fix for that. But anyways, oh my God. Wait, hang on. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm getting distracted by some of this. 248 in Israel? What the hell is going on here?
That's the probably the rockets flying in or something.
Man, that's... Dude, that's the war between Israel and the Palestinians turning on again, and it's just causing bad air quality. But
Oh, the
jeez.
smoke is high because there was just an explosion.
Oh my God. It's like the Gulf War in Kuwait again. It's like all the oil rigs just got blown up. Oh my Lord.
Hover over it again. What's it say?
Just very unhealthy. That's it. Just a lot of carbon monoxide. Just loads.
Man, he got a mad face on there when it says very unhealthy.
Man, dude, coming from Beijing air, that can mean one of two things. That means either you're about to disappear, or there's about to be something that never happens on Tiananmen Square in 1989. One or the other. It's one or the other. But good God, like some of the air quality around here. What's it like in Alabama? What do they say is going on down here? Oh, we actually
We had
have.
an orange alert yesterday, so it must have gotten. It's moderate. Oh.
Let's see. Down in Montgomery, the PM is a little high in the air, probably from all the gunfire. But anyways, but anyways, that's on to the next one. But that was a very interesting look at the air quality around the world, and I hope that you don't end up with that problem up there, Charlie, in Montreal. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Walter A. Lakota Jr. yet again. He put in a second super chat. This time it's a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Walter, for the second support. He says, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. Got to get back to work. I am in Denmark, now getting ready to head to Greenland for a resupply run, and aloha to all.
And aloha to you. Dang, man, he's moved from the last time we talked to him. Last time, just in case you all weren't around last time Walter was here, because that was like, I think like 4 months ago. He was in Yokohama in Japan on the USNS Loyal. And then the USNS Loyal set off one day, and he told us that. And I thought he would eventually dock at a port again and be back on stream, and then that didn't happen for 3 months. So in the course of like 3 months or so, it seems, he's gotten all the way from Yokohama, Japan, all the way to the other side of the world in Denmark. That is really
Man,
cool.
this guy's got some people's dream job. He gets to tour the world like for a living.
Yeah, I mean, hell, I mean, Matthew, there is a place you can do that all the time. It's called the Navy.
Oh, not really, though, because if you get put in a submarine or something, you don't know what the hell's going on.
Hey, guys, you ever been to Djibouti? That's, everyone always said that, and everyone went, hee guys, it's not funny. It's not funny, all right? Stop laughing. But anyways, I got to thank you so much once again for the support, Walter. I hope you have a fun time getting back to work, and I hope you have a safe trip out to Greenland. Because if I know anything about the sea, everyone always says that the North Sea is one of the most treacherous parts of the world's waters anywhere out there. Is the North Sea, and I believe it's also up here in the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea as well. These are some of the most dangerous parts of the world, so I hope you have a safe time sailing through it. I mean, plenty of ships do it, so I'm sure it's not that tough. But thank you so much once again for the support, Walter. Thank you for showing up tonight as well, because it's great to hear that you're fine and all right, and I hope you have a fun time on your way to Greenland. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, Walter, because folks like you make this channel possible. And it is amazing, once again, to have really cool people like you with really cool jobs, like it being in the Merchant Marine, that pop up every once in a while on their stream. That is just so neat. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $15 super chat from... from Todd Fabiker. And I always feel really weird pronouncing that last name because I don't know if I'm butchering it. But Todd, thank you very much for that support. And he says, what do you think about Ukraine attacking Sahivka? There is no way that it is well defended.
Let's see, Sahivka. How do you spell that, Matthew?
It's Serhiivka.
And I'm assuming that that would be in the Kherson Oblast. And so let's see what we got here. Probably, like, if this is the right one in the Kherson Oblast, I would say this is probably not defended well. That would be my guess. But at the same time, who really knows? Because the Russians, of course, did fall back and the floodplains still exist. I think they are receding at the moment, but Russian forces may have based themselves out of the area of Chernyanka, and also it would be pretty hard to cross that floodplain for the Ukrainians, considering the currents may still be strong, and there may also be brand new shoals, or there may be roofs of houses right under the water that they may not be able to see because the water is brackish, and then they end up running into it, and people end up getting thrown overboard, and a boat capsizes. It may be tough, but if this is the Serhiivka you're talking about, it is possible that they could try. Also, speaking of which, y'all, I forgot to always show y'all this. This is the lock right here and the canal that feeds water all the way right into Crimea. That's it. Damn, son. Where'd you find this? Google Maps. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and let's see here. Dump the uranium ammo on your own cornfields and eat the bread.
What idiot would
no
dump
thanks.
depleted uranium rounds on a freaking cornfield? I mean, it's a
Oh,
weapon.
they're not getting the. We're not giving the ammo to Ukraine to dump it on cornfields. We're giving it to them to shoot at the Russians.
Dump your damn AR-15s into the cornfield and try and mince the ARs in the bread. Well, obviously that's not going to work, pal. It's a gun. It's not food. But anyway.
Oh, so that explains why Russia is so upset about sending it, because they think we're trying to dump it on their crops.
Dude, some Russian sits there and eats their bread. It tastes kind of metallic, man. It tastes like it's a little spicy, really. It's making my mouth tingle.
They're making these fertilizer granules so large, bliat.
Man, they're making them shaped like giant darts. I play darts when I drink vodka at the bar. It's just like, oh, that's not your normal dart, pal. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one, because I don't even know what the point of that statement is. But
Yeah.
if BMP said, eat your own AR, son. But I don't want. It just starts eating it like it's bread. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Gary Robbins, who puts in a $10 super chat. And thank you, Gary, very much for that support. He says, I keep holding my breath. Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraine. And thank you so much for the support, Gary, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I would have to say, I'm still holding my breath, but I have a lot of faith in the Ukrainian army, because they've done amazing throughout the entire war, and I'm sure they'll pull through in this counteroffensive as well. I have no doubt about it, because the folks in the Ukrainian army are some of the most ingenuitive, most intelligent, brave, and valiant people seen the world over. You don't see folks like them much. They're the ones that are talked about in history for all time, and I'm sure that they'll be able to conduct this counteroffensive quite well. And so with that, while I sit here and screw up my English, thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And you know what, Matthew? I feel like that guy, that Strelick guy, he's now introduced to me an interesting concept. Just throw random inedible crap into a field and then tell people to eat the bread from there. So let's just think, throw your damn automobiles out into the cornfield, see if the bread tastes nice or something like that. It's like
You must think that bread grows on like a crop or something. You have to produce that.
You know, you have to like grow that stuff, right?
But they don't mess up our bread growing operation.
Man, I guess he just thinks that everything in the world is bread too. Like there's no such thing as like like soy or corn or anything. You know, it's just all wheat. And speaking
That's one thing the Russians don't have either one of is bread. They don't have money, nor do they have the food.
Man, they don't have either, and they don't have the lottos to throw into the cornfield either to try and make bread. And man, imagine how milly a lot of bread would be. It's just nothing but steel, and it's kind of hot because it was in an oven. I mean, like that wouldn't be that good. Shuma said Audi bread. Ew. That's it too. Tastes like oil and, well, actually no oil, because for some reason Audis have an oil leaking problem. But it tastes like tailgating and no blinkers. But anyways, with that, hope that
That's a
addressed.
BMW.
Yeah, that's a BMW. No, Matthew. A BMW tastes like a broken down engine and expensive repair bills. But with that,
Now, Audi is the car of dictators. That's what what's his name? Bashar al-Assad drives.
really,
Yeah, he drives an Audi, or at least he did in that documentary that I watched.
man. I mean, like, I gotta be honest with you, man. That's such a weird car for a dictator to pick. You know, there's like Rolls Royce out there, which is like, or Bentley even for that matter, which for some reason always end up being everyone's car once you reach that level. And then he goes, yeah, I just like an Audi. It's like, well, dude, you could like afford everything else. Why are you going for an Audi? It makes no sense.
Because, the dictators, they want to stay in touch with the people,
Oh yeah,
They're
do.
people's people.
I'm a people person. I'm such a people person. I'm gonna have 12 of them lined up over there and shot. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a 10 and says, "Somebody get the laundry baskets because these Russians left their courage in their other pants." Oh wait, the other pants are all covered in trench trash after being worn by trash the whole damn week.
And I thank you so much for the support. I actually almost went ding, 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 because I was like, man, they hit it right out of the nail. But thank you so much for the support. And I'd have to agree with that 100%, because I've never seen an army like the Russians ever. I think the Iraqis, honestly, were better off than the Russians in the Gulf War and in the invasion of Iraq, in my honest opinion. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, and I would agree with that 100%. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from that guy. Yes, I'm that guy, pal. Who says, "Hiram, may the gods and the odds of war keep you safe. Slava."
And thank you so much for the support. And man, I'm gonna have you reread that one again, because I think you stalled there for a second in the middle of it, and I didn't understand it.
He said, "Hiram, may the gods and odds of war keep you safe. Slava."
And Slava Ukrainian. And thank you so much for the support. And I hope that that is the case for the Ukrainian soldiers, because fortunately I don't need it. I'm not actually on the front lines, but those folks certainly do. And I think that they'll probably get a fairly good amount of protection. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Chase Maddie, who puts in a 10 and says, "I remember when Prigozhin first mentioned Ukrainian forces pushing into Belgorod. Most thought it wasn't plausible. How did he know?"
And I thank you for the support, Chase Matty. And that's interesting. How did he know? And I hear Matthew, meanwhile, falling out of his chair over there. I heard, I was like, oh, I was like, you good? Wait, hang on. Let me play that out there, which is like, for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Chase Maddie, who puts in a 10
Here it comes.
and says, "I remember when Prigozhin first mentioned Ukrainian forces pushing into Belgorod. Most thought it wasn't plausible. How did he know?"
And I thank you for the support, Chase Matty. And that's interesting. How did he know? Did you hear it? And I hear Matty, meanwhile.
You know what that is?
What is that?
That's my desk going back down to the sitting position.
Really?
Yes.
Dude,
That's what that is every time you hear it.
I said, that's interesting. How do you know? And all I hear is, and I was like, oh, he's falling over. But anyways, I would say that's really interesting. How did he really know that? Because nobody really had an inclination that that would happen. Not even the Russians until it happened. So that may show that Prigozhin is having a little bit of context with the West. And we're also hearing rumors that Wagner is defecting over to the Western side as we speak in clumps. But we're not really sure how true that is, because I haven't gotten any video evidence to back that up. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for throwing in an interesting question there, Chase Matty, that we'll probably have to see is answered with time. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from AKA The Gamer, who says, "Here's, let's see here. Here's my little grain to the channel in the word, in family. Love you guys, and just take live chat."
And we will make sure to take a live chat. And I want to thank you so much for the support, AKA The Gamer, for helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this thing possible. And I always say this to everyone. I sound like a broken record a lot. But when this channel started, a long time ago, we went under the premise that we were going to not monetize this thing hardly at all. So we ran no ads, we got no sponsors, and we decided that if folks enjoyed this channel, they would support it, and they would be our sponsors pretty much, and they would help us to keep this thing running, and they would help us to keep this thing rolling. And I've got to thank everyone so far for supporting this channel and making that possible, because it is crazy to think, it's crazy to believe that folks have supported this channel well enough that we have been able to keep this thing rolling. And I got to thank you so much for throwing in what you're calling a grain, but to us, it's support like any other, for helping this channel to keep on rolling, because folks like you make this possible. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. We would have to be running ads, or we'd have to be running sponsors. We would have to have something to try and keep this thing running. And honestly, at that point, I would rather not run it than run it at all, because I feel like at that point we're selling out. And you know, it's always interesting. It's always very interesting to me, because whenever I give this speech now, there's a group of haters out there that want to make it sound like this channel is monetized, but in response to that, it's like, I don't run ads. We don't have memberships. You know, if we wanted to monetize this thing, you would tell it's monetized. The only way we are able to make it monetized is through super chats. And y'all get to decide whether y'all want to support or not. There's nothing harassing y'all when y'all get on this channel and say, hey, you know, get a membership. You know, it's just there at the bottom of the chat. You know, if you want to support us, you can. If you don't have to. And I think that's a great way to run a channel, because that means if people enjoy your channel, you keep running. If people don't enjoy your channel, well, you're out the door. And so I got to thank you so much once again for the kind words, and of course supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because folks like you have made it possible for 475 days, and folks like you will help to make this possible for even another 475 days if needed. And so with that, we'll make sure to get that live chat. And what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question goes to Andrew, who says, is it true that Putin doesn't use the internet?
I would doubt that. I mean, like, in the entire world, it's just so hard to imagine someone not using the internet. I get very old people, maybe people in their 80s and 90s not using the internet, but then we have a decent amount of viewers who are older than 65 here. I think something like 20% of our viewers are older than 65, according to our channel analytics. So that shows me that a lot of people now use the internet. A lot of people are easily able to navigate the internet. So that would just be so weird, especially for someone in his age bracket to not be able to use the internet or not get on it at all. But then again, it is Russia, and they are kind of backwards, so maybe he's not getting on it for that reason, but that still would be weird. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and allowing us to answer that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a super chat from Super Action General, who puts in a $5 donation and says, for the live chat, done. And get a question from them, please. Done.
And thank you so much for the support, Don. And we will make sure to get the live chat done. But thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, Don. And so that Don, what did he want done?
And this one goes to Christopher, who says, Matt, and also Enforcer, what are your thoughts of Putin giving Shoigu the cold shoulder and becoming the scapegoat?
I think they might try and make Prigozhin the scapegoat. I think Shoigu might be okay for now. He might be able to weather it out for a little, because we haven't really seen him enter the bad graces yet. Prigozhin is certainly entering bad graces, or nutsack as we call him. He's entering the bad graces, but I think he'll probably become the scapegoat before Shoigu did, because Shoigu's already kind of like positioning a play, probably approved by Putin, to have Prigozhin arrested, and then he'll become the scapegoat, and then they'll say, we have to focus on our internal problems like Prigozhin, because he really is the problem. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for support and allowing us to sponsor that live chat, Don. And with that, we are on to the next one, Don.
And our next one goes to Jesus UCSB yet again. This time he puts in a $19 donation, and thank you, Jesus, for that support once more. He says, reminder to the enforcers, the tanker from Los Angeles, California is with you to the end of the war. And we will meet soon. And Mexican tacos on me, LSA, LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Jesus UCSB, and the tacos as well. I gotta tell you, Matthew and me are suckers for fish tacos. I mean, like, I'll tell you, man, I will make sure to enjoy and relish a delicious fish taco, or any taco for that matter, even with carnitas. Like, I'm telling you, tacos made right, you just can't beat them. Really, honestly, you can't beat any food made right. Like, there's nothing wrong with good food of any kind. And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Jesus, and also giving that offer, because we will make sure eventually to take you up on that offer. And I thank you so much for reminding us that you'll be with us until the end, Jesus UCSB. And it's good to know that folks will be, because we have been here for 475 days. That's an incredibly long time, you know, and that's so long that since the beginning of this channel running the first stream about this war, there are kids out there that were born on that day that are now a year and a half old. And that's actually really weird to think about. I mean, like, hell, they might start walking soon or something, you know, if they were born at the beginning of when the stream started run. And I've got to say, that is crazy. And it's been amazing to know that so many people have stuck it out with us, like BC Skyman, among a whole bunch of other people. BC Skyman was the first to come to mind right there. And I got to thank you so much once again, Jesus, for being a dedicated member of this LSA and sticking the course with us so far. And hopefully everyone will stick the course with us until the very end of this war. because I remember way back when we started this stream, and we first ever, I mean, like, this channel was really just war reporting until we got monetized, because once we got monetized, we could run fundraisers, we could receive super chats, we could do all that stuff. And I remember back then, people were blown away. It was a revolutionary concept back then for a live stream to run, or a channel to run for that matter, and not run ads. And everyone was like, what the hell do you mean, dude? That's crazy. I remember back then there was actually a massive push for us to run ads and have sponsors. And we had one sponsor, and then we never had another one again because I'm like, you know, nothing wrong with the sponsor, but I didn't like how it felt, you know, because while we make the war light and, you know, always joke about it and everything, at the same time, it is a war, and it seems really weird to say today's, you know, war is sponsored by so-and-so. You know, it's like, that's just really weird to me, and I didn't like that. And then I also didn't like ads too. And whenever we said we're not running ads, we're not running sponsors, everyone was like, what the hell? They were like, how are you going to keep it running? We were like, well, you know, we'll just keep it running by y'all supporting us. You know, even if that means we don't make as much, that's fine to me. We'll keep it going. And since then, we've run it that way. And I remember way back then, you know, and it's changed because, you know, people take things for granted, and we have been running for nearly 500 days, so it's not new anymore. You know, it's 500 days old. But I remember way back in the day, people were like, that is insane. Like, that is crazy. And I remember some people saying, man, the channel cannot survive like that. And yet we have. And that is insane to me to think that folks like you, Jesus, who've stuck with us for so long and also supported us and helped us to keep this thing running and also supported the fundraisers as well, have made it possible for us to pass $1 million raised for fundraisers operating in Ukraine, and have also helped us to keep this thing running in this weird experimental way it runs where we only get supported from viewers. And even still, I remember one YouTuber I was talking to a while ago, they were like, so, and I'm not going to say their name, they're not in the Ukraine war world, they're in the history world, but I think they asked something like, well, how does your monetization work? I was like, I have none, it's just super chats. And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we just, you know, if the viewers enjoy it, they support it, and if they don't, we're done for. And they were like, that's bizarre, and, you know, that was wild to me. Also, Taylor McDowell said, guys, there's other channels that don't run ads. It actually seems most of Ukraine guys don't run ads or sponsors. But here's the thing. We were the first to do that. Some Ukrainian war channels came around after we started. I can actually think of two off the top of my head that certainly came around a few months after we started. And in some of those instances, we were the first to do it. Like, as far as running no ads and having no sponsors, we were the first channel in the Ukraine war world to do that entirely and just have nothing on it and just run news. And that's what made us revolutionary back then, is that we were the ones to do it. And then, you know, as more people hopped in, like around June and May, because Denis Davidov actually hopped into the Ukraine war reporting world in May, and then Ukraine Matters, I think, hopped in around June or July. And so then it was kind of like a precedent that had been set at that point. You know, if you ran the news, you just ran it kind of ad-free at that point. So then other channels started running ad-free. But as far as it went, we did it since the start. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, Jesus. And I thank you so much once again for support and the offer. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Russ Rizzo. And thank you, Russ, for that support. He says, during the Sunday fundraiser, I asked if you guys have seen the Rodney Dangerfield gets one of these. It was like the original, like, before the internet. Was I ignored for being too political? If so, I'm sorry.
And I thank you for support, Russ Rizzo. I don't know if you're ignored for being too political. Mandy's the one who kind of works on the whole live chat thing when it's live, so I don't know.
Oh, hello.
But, hello there. But let's see.
I don't recall. Honestly.
I don't know. Let's see. Rodney Dangerfield gets one of these. It was the original, like, before the internet. Oh, wait a minute. Was that? Yeah. I think I've seen that before. But it's like at the very corner of my brain. I can't really remember it too well. But I think I have seen that before, Russ Rizzo. But with that, I got to thank you so much again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And I don't think I can't really remember if you were saying anything on Sunday, because Sunday was a wild night. The chat was going at 1,000,000 miles an hour the entire night. So I can't exactly remember. But if you were, don't worry. We usually, though, whenever anyone gets like kind of on borderline politics or gets political, we usually do start to give a wider berth to responding to that, because we don't want to get affiliated with either side. You know, if you've ever been around in one of the question segments before, honest reason is, you know, not really a big fan of trying to hop into those camps because once you hop into one, they don't really make much sense, whether it be one or the other. And I don't want this channel to fall into that either. On top of that, we're a pro-Ukraine channel. And I don't think it's smart to sit there and start trying to throw out half of a supporter base for Ukraine because they're a part of a political affiliation you don't agree with. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so we always make sure to give a very wide berth to anything that deals with domestic politics or foreign politics sometimes, although every once in a while, just because the war kind of demands it, we will go into that a little bit. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support, Russ Rizzo. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to White Lightning 777, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "Why was your earlier short video age restricted? It wasn't controversial."
And I thank you for the support. I don't know why it was age restricted, to be honest with you, because I went back through and I looked at it, and there was nothing that was against the community guidelines in it, and there was nothing graphic, and nothing was in violation of the guidelines. So I don't know why that one was age restricted. There are some people out there who, you know, have it out for us, though, and they're probably trying to mass report stuff, and so YouTube just automatically age restricted it. But, you know, what can you do? It got age restricted. A little unfortunate, but we'll be making another one tomorrow, as usual. You know, we make them 7 days a week, and they never stop either. So we'll just be making another one tomorrow. Different stuff in it, new day, and hopefully that one won't be age restricted. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And May said LSA will be the next political group in America. Honestly, I would have to be honest with you. If I could just create an independent political party separate from the other two, and it succeeded, I would be fine with that. You know, because that would be the easiest way for me to just take everything that I think and just throw it into a party and be like, that's the party. And then just, it takes off. Kind of like how Zelensky did with, I think it was Studio 24 was the name of it, or Cartval 24.
I think so.
Yeah, he pretty much did that. And I would hope that I could have done something like that, but once again, that's pretty hard in America. You know, it's very hard in America because a lot of people think that, you know, voting out of the other two is a wasted vote. And that's a stigma that sticks on everything. That's why really no third party has ever survived, because everyone's like, well, you know, if you don't, it just won't work. And one thing I don't get, you know, is that they say you need 270 electoral votes to win, you know, and that's the thing. But that doesn't mean that you can only have two parties. You know, you can have a third one, and once the elections start to finally come towards their end, the two smaller parties, you know, of course, larger if you combine them together. Let's say it's like 40-40-20, you know, and the third party is 20%. That 20% party can make a coalition with one of the larger ones, and you can have a three-party government, you know, and it will work just fine. They would just have to kind of like, I guess, be absorbed into one of the larger parties as a coalition, and then they could have a singular candidate, or they could start to compromise on ideals, one or the other. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I may be incorrect on that. Matthew is the political science major, I believe. I don't know if a coalition could actually work like that, like it sometimes does in the UK in a parliamentary system. But with that, maybe one day we will have an LSA party. Who knows? And Juan Ant said, LSA Kingdom. I don't want to become a king. I just want to be a president. Because 4 to 8 years of being a president, honestly, would be enough for me. Being a president is a massive burden. The presidents, honestly, that didn't do that good, they always say that it was fun because they didn't do anything. But then the presidents who really tried to do something, they always say it was a terrible burden and they never want to do it again. And I probably end up being one of those people because I burn out. I'd be like, man, I want to leave. So I wouldn't want to be a leader for life. I just probably want to do 4 to 8 years and then go. Make my changes and leave. But with that, I hope that does kind of address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a $5 super chat. And thank you, CK, for that support. And of course, CK asks for a live chat question. And we will grab one. And the live chat question goes to, let's see here. It goes to Melissa Harden, who says, Matt, a zone on Ukrainian soil from which Ukraine cannot fire rockets into Russia, setting off tactical nukes to irradiate the land, question mark.
Maybe. I would say that's a possibility, but that would take a lot of tactical nuclear weapons to do, and it wouldn't last long because the radioactive fallout from those kinds of things only lasts like 2 weeks and then it's gone. So it wouldn't last too long. It probably wouldn't be that effective. So that may be what they're talking about, but at the same time, That'll be pretty expensive, pretty high maintenance, and it wouldn't last that long. So it's possible, but also very difficult to pull off for a very long time. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mr. G. Brooks, who puts in a 5 and says, are Russians dug in trench or pillbox style in occupied territories? And what are the Russian defense lines composed of? Or is it mostly air?
The Russian defensive lines in the south are mostly composed of dragon's teeth, trenches, defensive pillboxes, and then in the third line, it's once again more trenches and defensive pillboxes. The first defensive line appears to be a very basic infantry trench with dragon's teeth, and the hope is that the dragon's teeth will stop armor from advancing point blank onto the trenches, while the infantry try and somehow stave off the tanks. The second and third lines practically use the same philosophy, just dug in troops in a static position, will do well. That's what they're thinking. So that's what the defensive positions look like in the south right now. And of course, we've seen that doesn't really work too well, especially against a mobile enemy. But then again, it's nearly a 90-mile long defensive position spanning all the way from the area of kind of like Vasilivka all the way over to Polohi and Fedorivka. So it is a pretty formidable line, but at the same time, you know, it's a static line, and static lines have not proven to be the most effective defensive positions in modern war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have yet another super chat from that guy who puts in a $5 donation and says, Teenage Wasteland. Oh, yeah. It's only a teenage wasteland.
Teenage Wasteland, what does that mean?
Oh.
But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But unfortunately, I don't know what that means, so I don't really know how to comment on it. But I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have another super chat from that guy who puts in a $5 donation once more and says, I still say it would be cool to build a smoker out of a Russian tank.
I'm not going to lie, I would also agree with you there that it would be cool to make a smoker out of a Russian tank. No doubt about that. That would be incredibly cool. Because
when they get hit with artillery, they automatically turn into a smoker.
Man, they be smoking them meats, but they ain't pork, man. It's a well, we can't say it. Yeah, it's an orc. Yeah, in orc. I was about to say something else. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. That guy, you are that guy, pal. Trust me, you're that guy. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And apparently that must have been a song from that guy. Everybody's saying the Who said it. So I don't know who said it either. So the Who.
Who?
But anyways, the Who. And yes, I'm being facetious. I know that's a band. Before anybody starts roasting.
And then Candy Nose Twins can say boo. Hey, don't scare me, man. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Katya, who puts in a 5 and says, did you know that Marcus, command sergeant of the 47th, became famous in 2014 when he started the first war vlog from the front line? He's basically a forefather of the genre.
Really?
Really?
Really? That's really cool. I actually didn't know that. And I thank you for the support and sharing that little tidbit with us, because I actually didn't know that about that fella in the 47th who made that message earlier. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and sharing that interesting tidbit with us. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for sharing a cool fact with us that I had no idea about. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Withered Spartan, who puts in a 5 and says, if everyone in the Western world understood how privileged they are, they would never complain about anything again. LSA and Slav Ukraine. And I have to agree with that 100%, Withered Spartan. We are very fortunate in the Western world, and we simply don't understand it. And I'll be honest with you, until I heard some stories coming out of North Korea from this woman, I believe her name is Yeonmi Park, I didn't really quite understand how bad it can get. It's really atrocities that happen around the world that Americans and Westerners really don't have to really fool with on a daily basis, at least for the most part, and we are very fortunate. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to agree with you, Withered Spartan. A lot of people, and I would say it seems more so of a reality here in America than elsewhere. And I'm not saying this directed towards one side. I'm saying this towards both sides. A lot of people have become detached from reality and how bad it is in other countries. Like, you know, just to address a few things that I always find weird is when people say, America is no longer a first world country. And then you go look at China that makes their high-speed railroad bridges out of corn on the cob and broken dreams. It's like, well, that's not really first world either. It just looks cool. And then it'll collapse in like a year. And then 30 people will die. And then, you know, it's covered up by the Chinese government, so you never hear about it. It's like, and, you know, and then other things like people saying, you know, in America, people are bad off. People can hardly afford food. And yet in America's history, there's never been a time where people have actually starved to death because there was a lack of food. People have starved to death because they couldn't afford to buy food, but they never starved to death because there was just no food. That's happened everywhere else in the world, pretty much, except for in North America, in the United States, and in Canada. And it's like, you know, it's just wild to hear people say stuff like that and then say that there are countries out there that are better off. You know, like even to hear sometimes Europeans say that, because it's like, you know, I don't think people get it, but, you know, Europe and America are pretty much best places to live in the world. You know, you're not going to find people starving to death because of a lack of food. You know, there's food in so much abundance in the United States, we have to pay people to destroy the food so that way it's not worthless. You know, we have to do all kinds of crap to keep this running. And sometimes I feel like, people in the modern world, especially here in America, kind of like live in fantasy lands nearly, you know, and they imagine up things that just don't really exist. I mean, hell, if you look at it, people in America are very lucky. People in Europe are really lucky. There's no such thing as food shortages anymore. You know, back just 130 years ago in Europe, food shortages were normal. Food shortages were kind of common depending on droughts and the weather. And in America, it never was the case. There was never such a thing as a food shortage here in America. You know, things are relatively inexpensive. I mean, hell, compared to people 100 years ago, even in America, the average person now owns a whole bunch of stuff that they don't really need to own, you know, and they just own it because they can, because they have the money to buy the stuff. You know, and honestly, it's not that bad, you know, and that's coming from a history major. So, you know, I, of course, sat there and had to learn about how people lived just 130 years ago in the, you know, mid to late Victorian era. And that was not good. I would tell you, I would not live in the Victorian era because it was bad. It was even bad over here. You know, it was not that great, and things have massively improved. And in a lot of areas of the world, it hasn't improved at all. You know, people are still starving to death. I mean, like, hell, you can look at Africa. You know, everywhere in Africa, there's no food. People just starve to death all the time in famines. In Saudi Arabia, there's constant civil unrest, unless if you're in a select few countries like Saudi Arabia, where there's very little civil unrest. And, you know, and people are constantly in the middle of war zones each and every day. You look at places like Asia, where the standard of living is just rock bottom. You know, like, yeah, sure, China's got a massive GDP, but look at the average Chinese citizen. They live like they're still in the 19th century. You know, it's like we're very lucky to be where we are, and I don't really think a lot of people get that. I mean, like, hell, even for the most part, while Russia's really bad off, Russia is, you know, it's okay. I mean, like, compared to other places in the world, for example, really anywhere in Africa or South America, I mean, they're not that bad off either. And people in Ukraine, hell, they were living high on the hog for an Eastern European country even before this war. And so, you know, it's like, man, people, you know, I feel like people take for granted how lucky they are. And, you know, that's, you know, if I had to give a critique on both sides now in the modern world here in the United States, both sides live in fantasy world where things are about to collapse and fall apart, but in reality, things have never been better in history, especially here in the States. And so I'm always wondering at this point, I'm like, what in the world are people really griping about? Because there really isn't that much to gripe about, and yet people find something to complain about anyways. But
We got to hold on and protect what we have, folks, because this American experiment doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
I don't know what the hell that meant, but all right. But thank you so much once
That
again.
means protect America because it's special.
All right. Well, with that, thank you so much once again for support with us.
Why is that so confusing?
And helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from that guy who says, before you join the Navy to see the world, quote unquote, keep in mind that the Earth is 4/5 water. And that's true, that guy. That is recruitment talk, per se. But Enforcer, what say you?
And that is true. Those guys, the Navy recruiters, they never tell you that you're going to be sailing around the world for months on end and probably pulling a port after 4 months at sea. Yeah, you'll see the world, but you'll see all the water on it, and it's not that great. I remember one person, went to the Navy and they hate it. Like, they actually hate it. They're like, this sucks. It's terrible. You're on like a destroyer for 4 to 5 months. You don't get to talk to anyone hardly. But I mean, like, hell, it's still improving, you know, especially on a carrier. I mean, you can watch movies on a carrier in a little movie theater and stuff. So it's not that bad. But at the same time, you know, it's like, man, I honestly, I love naval stuff. I think naval stuff is really cool. It's so hard for me to fathom, though, being at sea for so long. Like, you know, just on a ship. It's weird for me to think about. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 2 and says, donate early. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Dupper Bob. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running with your consistent support. And, Dupper Bob, are you asking for people to support this channel? Well, if you did, thank you for the support, and thank you for being so kind as in trying to rally folks. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Terrence Custer, who says, Happy Taco Tuesday.
And thank you so much.
I'll take a taco today, and I'll pay you back on Tuesday.
I'll take a taco today. And thank you so much once again for the support and supporting the Taco Tuesday. And we will make sure to have a taco. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, someone else said something, Matthew, that I just found really interesting. Someone said, yeah, people in America are obese. And, you know, people don't really understand. That's a big blessing to have, you know, just compared to 100 years ago, is to have nearly 30 to 40% of your population is obese. And the problem in your country is that people are too fat instead of people are starving to death and dying. It's like, you know, people, you know, talk about that a lot and say it's a bad thing, but you know, consider the alternative. People could be starving to death and emaciated. So it's like, you know, I would rather have extremely, you know, obese people, you know, because it says that our country is succeeding really well and food must be inexpensive for people to be able to, you know, bulk up. And I would say that's honestly a very good thing to have. I mean, like, hell, even in, like, and this is one thing that's so weird to me, is that, you know, in America, we always talk about, you know, oh, you know, poverty is terrible. People can't really afford things. Yet there are obese people who are in poverty. It's like, well, you know, it's even in poverty. I mean, it's not that bad because you can literally go and buy food until you can become obese. You can't do that in some countries. There's just literally no food to buy. And that's why I'm like, you know, this country is you know, this country, or really most of Europe at this point, is pretty freaking blessed because even the impoverished have huge access to food. And it's, you know, and then JSM said, Marifati, hell yeah, man, I'm proud. I'm proud that that's the thing that America can own. I mean, like, people are obese over here because we make so much food and it's so cheap.
Although a little discipline could help and go a long way, because on the other end of the scale, if you get toward the top end of the obese scale, then you start having the same problems that a malnourished person would have when it comes to health.
Oh, sure, but still, you know, like, comparing the two, what's better prosperity-wise? Starving people because there's no food, or obese people because there's too much food? And it's like, you know, obese people...
I think they're both about almost as bad as each other.
So you would say, so you would exchange obese people for people who are in a famine?
They're on the same playing field, in my opinion.
Not to me, man. I would rather take an overabundance of food than no food. Because, you know, with no food, everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's starving to death. Everyone's angry, and then you get civil unrest, and then it just gets even worse. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to JDevil11 Osman, who puts in a 2 and says, Enforcer Matt rocks, and Enforcer, you really need a cookie.
And I thank you so much for the support, and thank you for giving me a cookie. I like cookies. And thank you for saying Enforcer Matt rocks. Honestly, though, I like white chip macadamia cookies. I think those are some of the best. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Weathered Spartan yet again, who puts in a $2 super chat and says, having a toddler, I hate seeing kids in the KIA list, and I must admit it is very unfortunate to see that as well.
And I would have to agree. It's terrible to see that. And I think that's, once again, a rallying point and a further reason why the Ukrainians should continue to fight the Russians and push them out of the country. So that way, hopefully, the war will end here, hopefully soon, and every Ukrainian will be back into the nation of Ukraine again. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that being said, we are fresh out of Super Chat questions, but thank you all once again for helping to support the channel. And as we always say, keep the lights on. And with that being said, we're moving into our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream, we have Mark Hodges, C. Fay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Benu, and Paul Schultz. They said tonight's Morse code cipher says Russia is getting better at being beat every day. Glory to Ukraine.
And that is correct. Y'all got the message right. They are being, they are getting better at being beat every day. And so thank y'all once again for deciphering that Morse code message. Y'all did get it correct on the 475th day of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you all once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our first live chat question goes to Mike T, who says, Enforcer, can nuclear missiles be shot down? And thank you. Slava Ukraine.
I would say some of them can. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, in theory, cannot be shot down. But every other kind of nuclear missile can possibly be shot down before they made it to their target. So it depends on what kind. As long as they're not an ICBM, it's possible. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from N. Hansen, who says, Nutsack got drafted too. Word is he caved and signed. Any word?
Really? I didn't hear about that, actually. I would have to declare ignorance on that one for the moment, because I'm not exactly sure what happened with that. So I actually haven't heard about that at all. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Enter Subjective, who says, would y'all support Taiwan if China invaded and advocate for material support?
Could you reread that one again?
Would y'all support Taiwan if China invaded and advocate for material support?
Yes, I would support Taiwan 100% in that war. Honestly, I would support the United States getting directly involved in that war immediately, in interests of East Asian security. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question from the live chat goes to Ian, who says, have the Ukrainians received cluster munitions from anyone yet? And if not, why is it?
The Ukrainians, I believe, have not received any cluster munitions from anyone. And I think the reason is that no one's really just been willing to provide them yet. I don't think there's an actual logical reason that anyone has stated for that. It's just that it's never come up, and no one's really, offered them to the Ukrainians yet. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Judy Wilson, who says, Matt, do you think the war would end if Putin was out of the picture?
I would say maybe. I would also say maybe not. It really depends on who becomes the leader of Russia after Putin is gone. If it is Medvedev, it's kind of up in the air whether the war would end or not. If it's Shoigu, the war may end. If it's anyone else, who really knows? It really depends on the person and also the circumstances in which Putin is no longer the leader. If he was assassinated, he may become a martyr to the Russians or the Russian government, and they might use that as a rally to even further escalate the war. If he is ousted in a coup, then that would probably suggest that the war would end right afterwards, because that would be something that Putin started, and they would be trying to erase Putin's impact on Russia and the government. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, I see some people saying that food, and more so obesity, is not about the quantity of food, it's about the quality of food. And to that, I would have to say that there were obese people in the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, when food, there was really not a lot of preservatives in food, it just had to be eaten as is, because there wasn't really any way to preserve food, and there were obese people back then. And there are people now who are obese, who eat quality food. It's really, in my opinion, of course, more about caloric intake than it is about the quality of the food. Because yes, sugar is a massive part of caloric intake, and it can make one obese, and that's considered a low-quality food. For example, potato chips, which actually have sugar in them, a small amount. But at the same time, you could get obese off of good quality food. I believe there are obese Europeans, like for example in Germany, and let's pull that up, obesity rate in Germany, 19%. And in the European Union, there are far higher criteria for food quality than there is here in the US. And still the obesity rates are somewhat high. Let me check the US's though. USA. 41.9%. So ours is actually twice as high as the Europeans. So maybe actually, I'm gonna have to reverse there. Maybe there is an argument to be said that quality of food actually does have an impact on obesity. But still, you can see in Germany, for example, where food quality is far greater, really across the whole of the European Union, food quality is far greater than it is here in the States. And they still do have about a quarter of their population, or 1 in every 5 of them, are obese, showing that even with higher quality food, there is a possibility for a good amount of the population to be obese. And I would still have to say, even though it's far lower than the US is, that's still a good problem to have, is trying to have people moderate their food intake rather than having no ability to have any food intake whatsoever. But that's a good point, and I thank y'all for bringing that up, because that is true. It appears that, at least according to Germany versus the US, food quality does have an impact, possibly, on the obesity rates in the country. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Very interesting points y'all made there. And also, I had to reverse on mine because they were very good points backed up with info. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, just real quick, I saw Miss Red Sphere say, "Sorry, Enforcer, I need to disagree with the nutritious quality food available to all citizens." And I have to say that I have noticed every time you go to the grocery store, any food that is typically marketed as healthy, it's typically a lot more expensive than the processed food. So I do see some merit in that. Unfortunately, though, I think it's simply the cost of making the healthier foods being non-processed is what makes it more expensive in itself. I think it's cheaper to do the processed foods by production costs, but I'm not an expert on that, so I'm sure somebody will have some things to say about that. But Enforcer, would you like to comment before we move on to the next?
Actually, I have looked into the history of food quality, and you wouldn't believe it, Matt. You know, like white bread, which is nowadays considered like lower quality bread. You know, like it's pure white. You know, like
Yes.
Wonder Bread. Back in the day, pretty much all the way back until 100 years ago, that was actually considered the rich person's bread instead of the poor person's bread, because the grains that made that flour had to be highly processed to the point that they were just pure white flour, and that's what made that white bread. Up until that point, up until that switch about 100 years ago, normal, like, whole grain flour was actually considered poor people's flour and poor people's bread. And so back then it was fairly common to see poor people eating whole grain breads and, you know, what we would consider nowadays high quality food, because that was just really the easiest way to produce the stuff. I mean, it didn't really require a lot of processing or a lot of effort. You pretty much picked the grains right off the stalk, did a little bit of husking, and they were good to go. You know, put that thing in the oven, make some bread out of it. But nowadays, when industrialization came around and making highly refined flour became the thing, because you got to remember, back in the day, poor people, or poorer people, you know, not the high class, they would look at white bread and they would go, that is a symbol of status and I have to have white bread. And so companies started to try and make white bread more affordable to appeal to that market, so that way they would buy the rich people's bread. And so as they did that, they of course continued to lower the price of highly refined and enriched flour, to the point that it became the poor person's bread, and then multi-grain bread or whole grain bread became the rich person's bread, and it just did a complete inverse. And it's really weird because it did that in every category as well. Like every single food type back then, what we would call nowadays a rich person's meal, you know, or a wealthier person's meal, where they can afford things like the whole grain bread and the higher quality chicken that, you know, isn't chlorinated or something like that. Back then, that was just considered normal food, and what we now call, you know, just standard food, that was for rich people. You know, it's a really weird thing, and it had a lot to do with society and culture and wanting to, you know, of course, excel up to what would be considered a higher class status off of your food. And that's why nowadays the quality of food for average people is so poor, because it was an attempt to make what was considered at the time high class food affordable for everyone.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's why here in America, food quality just isn't that great. And then of course there's other things that popped up, you know, just things like Cheetos. You know, you can't really explain Cheetos; they just popped up. You know, and then like the spices and everything. You know, like you can't explain that stuff through a historical lens, but with bread you can, because bread truly evolved because everyone eats bread. You know, I can't think of anyone except for someone who maybe has a gluten allergy that doesn't eat bread. But throughout all of history, throughout the millennia, people have always eaten bread. And so you can measure what history has been like and what the Industrial Revolution did to change bread. And that's why, you
I'm
know,
I'm a lucky person because I have such a high metabolism. I can eat literally anything, and it really doesn't affect me in a bad way at all. Obviously, if I eat a bunch of junk, it's probably gonna have a negative effect on my arteries and stuff like that. But I'm very fortunate to have a high metabolism.
I don't. I do not have a high metabolism. And also, some people are talking about cheeses and stuff like that. That's also true too. Like at the time, y'all wouldn't believe it, but cheddar was actually considered a rich person's cheese. Now you can get cheddar at the store. You know, like it's like that with everything because companies are incentivized by profit. And when a company sees that rich people eat cheddar, and whenever people who are wanting to aspire to be a wealthier person based off of the status of their status and therefore being able to buy cheddar, they will appeal to those people, and so they will try and make cheddar mass produced and cheaper, and then cheddar becomes the common deal. And in reality, that doesn't mean that the food quality of the rich person's cheddar back then degraded so that way it was affordable for poor people. No, it's the exact same kind of cheddar. They just found out how to mass produce it so that way it was affordable for everyone. Like highly enriched flour that makes Wonder Bread and other breads like that, that's not healthy at all. It's never been healthy. But back then, that was considered a status symbol because that meant you were able to afford this highly processed flour that took a long time for someone to mill, and so therefore you were a wealthy person because you had the white bread. So you know that's kind of like the whole history behind the thing. And I'm trying to see the live chat. Let's see here, and I'm trying to read some stuff. Food is considered trash food by modern Western nutritionists. Yeah, and that's true of Ari. That's actually true. Food back then for ancient Romans that were in the very high class that would spend like 30% of their money, which back then was like, I think it was like 600,000 sestertii per year. They were like eating straight up garbage. I mean, like that would be considered junk food nowadays, but that's what they called high class food back then because it was just hard to make. And nowadays, you know, everyone can buy it. It's like 75 cents at the store pretty much. But anyways, with that, we've been on food for too long. I'm always a big person to talk about food. Food's good, you know, who can deny that? But with that, we'll be moving on to the next one so that we don't go down this rabbit hole forever.
All right, and with that being said, we're back into our super chats. We have a few more. This one is from David Lynn Aker, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you, David, very much for that support. Sadly, there is no comment to address, but Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, David, and helping us to keep this thing rolling. You didn't leave a comment, but you did put goal, and I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. Also,
yes, indeed.
I don't mean to rabbit hole again, Matthew, but JD Mako threw up a very good point. And I think I may have told you this before, Matthew, but this may be a shocker to a lot of y'all. JD Mako is right. Lobster back in the day in colonial America, because lobsters were found in great abundance here on the western side of the Atlantic, they were actually so common, and they were also bottom feeders, which really added a lot to their stigma, that they were considered the roaches of the sea, and they were practically inexpensive. I mean, hell, even in the United States, lobsters were actually used as food for prisoners because they were just that worthless. And nowadays, people consider that a quality meal, a quality seafood meal, is to have lobster.
Man, if I could go back and load up a truck full of lobster at rock bottom and take it home, I'd love that.
Dude, go back in time and sit there, whip out a knife and go, I'm going to begin that lobster day. It's go to
Man,
jail.
give me some of that roach. Load it in the truck.
Give me that damn roach. And nowadays that has a whole different meaning. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $6 super chat from Georgie Georgiev, who says, "Hey man, greetings from BG East EU. We managed to elect pro-Ukraine government, and now we are looking forward to sending more aid. We are one of the biggest producers of Soviet-era shells, 105 and 122.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And also, that's great to hear. And hopefully, y'all will be able to help support Ukraine here in the future. They need all the support they can get. And it's great to hear that another country may be joining in the fold and helping to support the Ukrainians in this war effort. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and helping us to keep the lights on behind the scene. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Devin Harris, who puts in a 5 and says, "Why do the arrogance of Hungary thinks Europe and NATO needs them? They're the one who is blocking Ukraine aid, and they don't want Ukraine into NATO, question mark."
One second, can you reread that one again?
Why do the arrogance of Hungary thinks Europe and NATO needs them? They're the ones who are blocking Ukraine aid, and they don't want Ukraine into NATO? Question mark.
There is no reason that they're thinking that anyone needs them. They're just a part of the union and disagree with everyone. So that would be my best explanation. And also, did he call them the Aryans of Hungary?
No, arrogance.
Oh, the arrogance. I thought you were saying Aryans. That's why I had to have you reread that again. I was like, I don't think there are any Aryans in Hungary. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
Oh my goodness! If you read it with that context to it, that changes the whole question dramatically. But
I was like, wait a minute. I was like, hold up. This sounds like you should be lying. But anyways,
why do the Aryans of Hungary think Europe and NATO needs them? Oh jeez.
Dude, you got some guy called Orban in Hungary. He gets up on the stage. He says, it's like, uh-oh. It's like, I think we're going down the wrong path here. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and a question from the live chat next goes to Jeff Lieberman, who says, can you imagine being an orc fighting only to be killed by a deterrence guard?
Oh, that would be bad. You know, I couldn't imagine that, really. And that's terrible to think. You know, they get killed if they advance, they get killed if they retreat. It's a catch-22 for some of those guys. And, you know, I kind of pity them at that point. But then again, they still commit war crimes. So, you know, it's like a catch-22 there for me, too. It's like, do I pity them for committing war crimes, or do I pity the Ukrainians that were slaughtered by their hands? You know, it's like, which is it? But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ryan Jackson, who says, what are the current units assaulting around Bakhmut, and what is their progress?
The units assaulting around Bakhmut, it's mostly actions conducted by the 3rd Brigade here in the area of Klishkivka. We understand right now that they are making considerable advances in this area, taking 16 square kilometers over the past 24 hours, and it appears that the Russian 72nd Brigade that is in the area is in the state of collapse once again, and they are retreating backwards and into the area of Klishkivka. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well and give a not really a strategic, but more of a tactical outlook here on the southern flank of Bakhmut, where we're seeing most of the progress. Meanwhile, there are some Ukrainian units further north in the area of Hitne that are trying to create a breakthrough through the small Berkivsky Reservoir, and it appears that they're trying to move on into the area of Berkivka, Yehidne, and Krasnoora to try and further break through the Russian northern flank, and then sweep around to the back of the city. That appears to be the case at the moment on both flanks, and we also see no real direct fighting happening in the center area of Bakhmut, because it appears that the Ukrainians are trying to pull the smart move and avoid urban fighting altogether. And so with that, I hope that addresses every single aspect of the Bakhmut battlefield in a concise and quick way. And so with that, very good question, and thank you so much once again for asking it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat. This one is from Miss Redsphere that I called out earlier about that food question that sent us down a very informative rabbit hole, who put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for the support. And they said, thank you for keeping us updated daily, and choose a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Miss Redsphere, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying what we do. And I hope you enjoyed that rabbit hole, because that was a really interesting rabbit hole. And I also thank everyone for clarifying a couple of things like the food quality, because I actually didn't consider that, and y'all were right on that. Food quality is very important in the obesity rate stuff. But thank you so much for starting that cool rabbit hole, because I really enjoy talking about historical subjects. If y'all can't tell, that's where all the rabbit holes usually go. But still, thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and throwing in a kind word and appreciating the channel enough to support us and help us to keep this thing rolling. And we will make sure to get a question from the live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And this question goes to Shade Touch, who says, in case the South is taken, how difficult would it be to take Crimea? And would VE to be abandoned by Russia because supply problems are the same as Kherson was?
I would say that attacking Crimea is going to be a fairly difficult task for the Ukrainians to do. And I know that's quite a shocker, because a lot of people always hear me say, oh, the Ukrainians will sweep the Russians aside. But it's not really about the Russians here, it's about the terrain. And as you can see here, there's really only two passable areas in Crimea. There's the Chonhar Gap, and the only thing that really makes the Chonhar Gap is the Chongar Strait right here, which is about, I think it's like 200 yards wide, maybe 150 yards wide. and the Russians could blow these two bridges, and then the Ukrainians have to try and find a way to cross it. It's a bottleneck, and that's going to be very dangerous and very deadly for Ukrainian soldiers attacking this area. Meanwhile, in the Armyansk direction, while it's a lot more open, once again, it's fairly narrow. It's maybe only 2 miles wide. And the Ukrainian forces will once again have to bottleneck and push their way through here, and that means that the Russians could just put some slightly competent forces here and try and hold this as long as possible, and they may actually be able to inflict a little bit of damage because the Ukrainians won't be able to outflank them or find a weak point because they'll just have to attack them straight on. So Crimea will prove to be a lot more difficult than any other offensive that the Ukrainians have pulled. But if they play their cards right and they attack the right things at the right time and push at the correct moments to the correct positions, they could do it. But it's going to be very difficult. Honestly, I have a feeling that this will be a pretty high casualty offensive here for the Ukrainians just because of the terrain and the geography they would find themselves in. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for a really interesting question there. And I thank you so much, Miss Red Sphere, for sponsoring that question while my English fades away into the background. And then I start speaking German. Anyways, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And it looks like we have 2 questions remaining in the spreadsheet.
No way.
So with that being said, yes, no cap.
No, cap. I call cap, man. You got to find another. We'll just answer the 2 and round the thing out. But with that,
all right,
we're on to the second question of the night.
This one goes to Sax2, who says, is there a bomb which could wipe out those 19 Russian helicopters parked on the held runway, but without damaging the runway itself?
Unfortunately, probably not. Most bombs would damage the runway, even if they were an airburst bomb, and were able to explode above the ground. The blast would, and also the resulting shrapnel fragments and force of the explosion could probably end up damaging the runway a little bit to the point that it wouldn't be usable without some kind of repairs. I have a feeling that that would be pretty tough to do, especially to take out 19 helicopters, considering that they would be probably spread out over a pretty decent area just by the amount of helicopters alone. So it would prove to be somewhat difficult. Not impossible, but the best you could hope for is minor damage. You couldn't really get no damage whatsoever in that kind of situation. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we actually have one more question to answer that before we get to the final one of the night. Professor Hoodoo said, are you two CIA? Yeah, we're still waiting for the check. It's just, they've never, like, they said we're hired, but we've never gotten the check. It's overdue. It's overdue by 475 days at this point. I'm honestly waiting for the check. I mean, I followed their instructions to a T. I've sat here and I've said what they wanted. I'm just kidding. We're not CIA. That's at least what the CIA will want you to hear.
Our handlers is a Shiba Inu.
No,
dressed in Adidas.
Suka, блядь. That's actually a FSB handler right there, Matthew, in an Adidas tracksuit. The CIA guys, they wear like vests and stuff.
Oh, well, I mean, I thought maybe that Napo dog was our handler, but never mind.
Oh, okay, I get it there, I get it. And then Lum said, the deep state, oh man, but anyways, that we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Mad Machine, who says, with the orcs' anti-air greatly reduced, could Ukraine use A-10s to clear the trench lines with extreme prejudice?
They possibly could. Well, if the air was clear and there was no air defenses whatsoever, I would say certainly. Now, A-10s would excel in that kind of environment because there's no anti-air or air support to shoot them down. So I would say certainly the A-10s would excel in that kind of atmosphere wonderfully. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and it is the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure covering this news for all of y'all. I hope y'all have enjoyed greatly, and if y'all did, make sure to hit the like button, and make sure to subscribe. Subscribing makes us really happy, because it lets us know that folks enjoy this channel enough to help us to keep on running. Oh, I had to read that one right there. I was like, what the hell? But anyways, it helps us to keep this thing running, and also makes us really happy when folks subscribe to our channel, because it lets us know that people enjoy the effort we put in. We put in a lot of effort into this channel, a lot more than we used to when college was going. We make daily war summaries every single day, including Mondays, covering the past 24 hours of the war in a very short clip, maybe 3 minutes long. We also run these nightly live streams every single day of the week except for Mondays at the exact same time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can always count on us to be here. You can always count on us to cover this news, and we will never stop covering this news, and we'll never stop supporting Ukraine until this war ends. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. I hope y'all have a great night. Stay safe, take care, good luck, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, Slav Ukraine, and see you all tomorrow. Hear Slava.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.